Hey, this is Brett Gursky. Welcome to another episode of On the List. This is episode number 63. It's April 2021. We are coming to you from the BLEAV Podcast Network. My guest today is an old friend of mine who's also a very talented director. In the time we've known each other, he's directed the movies The Take with John Leguizamo and Rosie Perez, The Lincoln Lawyer with Matthew McConaughey and Ryan Phillippe, Runner Runner with Ben Affleck and Justin Timberlake, and The Infiltrator with Bryan Cranston. His latest movie, City of Lies, stars Johnny Depp and Forest Whitaker and tells the inside story of the investigations into the still unsolved murders of Tupac Shakur and the Notorious B.I.G. The movie hit theaters on March 19th, and as of April 9th, it's now available on VOD, so you can watch it anywhere you rent or buy movies. And of course, the director I'm talking about is Brad Furman. What's up, Brad?
Hey man, thank you for having me. Real
What's
privilege and
up?
honor. Got a
Yeah,
lot got a lot of love for you.
yeah, we've known each other a long time. We're gonna
It's
talk.
pretty crazy, right?
Yeah, we're gonna talk all about it. So we are on Zoom right now. So the video from this podcast will also be available on YouTube and Instagram. And I was thinking about it. I think the last time I saw you obviously was pre-pandemic. I think we ran into each other one night at Delilah in Los Angeles, but I
I
don't think
think it was
it's.
your birthday was the last time I saw you.
Oh, you're right. Actually, my
Yeah,
birthday party. Okay, so it wasn't that
yeah,
much longer. Yeah, 4 months later, the world changed completely.
yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I
But
know.
that's
Wow.
right.
Sad.
Okay.
Hopefully getting back to some new normalcy.
Yeah, new normal. So before we get into all the movies that I mentioned, I wanted to give people a little backstory about how we know each other. We've known each other 15 years,
Crazy.
which is crazy. A lot has happened in those 15 years. We met in 2006 in actually kind of a fun and unique way. I had taken this girl on a couple dates, and I mentioned, that I was a writer and director, and she's like, "Oh my God, you have to meet my roommate's boyfriend. He's a director."
That's awesome.
And remember that? And she was like, one day she's like, yeah, one day she's like, come on by. He's coming over. And I went over and I just remember sitting on couches and talking to you about movies till like the sun came up.
Yeah, yeah. And
And
then you worked for Brett for a little bit as
yeah,
well. And I had worked for Julia Roberts as her assistant years ago.
right.
Yeah, we had that camaraderie in a little bit. So,
Right. We had the assistant background and we were trying to make names for ourselves. And you did shortly after that with the take.
and you
And,
helped me throw that really cool party for the DVD release.
yeah,
It
absolutely.
was super kind, man. I really appreciated that. That was amazing.
Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, your first movie, The Take, when the DVD came out, I was doing a Wednesday night party at Randy Gerber's Lounge, Stone Rose, at the Sofitel.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and you got the cast and the crew to come, and we put the movie on all the TV screens, and
Very cool. It meant a lot to me. At that time, other than some of the festival routes, I'd never been a part of anything that I had made that had that. So that was always very memorable and very cool.
oh yeah, I actually found the pictures when I was getting ready for this from that night. So I'll email them to you. They're really cool.
All right, cool.
We were young. Um, but since then, you've obviously made five movies. The fifth movie is out right now. So, how do you feel now that City of Lies is available for people to see? It's out to the world. I know it's been a real labor of love for you. So, explain how it feels now that City of Lies is available to everybody.
I mean, you make these movies to obviously share them with people and to, get them out into the world. So, to make a movie and have it sit on the shelf for the multitude of reasons that this was just collecting dust at a bank,
Mm-hmm.
that's challenging because it's the antithesis of why you made it. So from that perspective, that was really hard. But I think the movie demarcates a unique time and shift in my life and career in the sense of I feel like in some ways I've made movies for the system in a way. You have to earn your stripes, and this was a shift in the sense of that the gravitas of the story, the impact of the message, the significance of Miss Wallace having lost a son, the relationship within the movie of Johnny playing Russ Poole, and the stories within the Poole family, and the sort of the connection and tie between the Pooles and the Wallaces. There were just many deeper themes here. I dealt with true life stuff, obviously with Bob Mazer and the Infiltrator, but
Right.
not to the degree or gravity of the impact that Biggie's had on culture and Pac's had on culture, and all of these things. And what I felt made me interested was the impact that these young individuals, had on me as an individual. So, to have the opportunity, which I worked very hard with Miss Wallace to do, not to exploit Biggie's death, but in actuality to uncover the truth and justice were things within a movie that for me, where I want to push my career, start making movies that are really in my heart and that I want to make. This is really an expose into the facts. Um,
Hmm.
and as a result, it's a little bit, for me at least, demarcates a turning point. But you can't actually have that happen unless you get the movie into the world. So, you know, this allowed for that to finally happen, getting it out there.
Yeah, exactly. I got a chance to see the movie this weekend. I was sent a screener in advance, so thank you for
That's
that.
great.
I thought it was awesome. You did a great job. You have such a
Thank you very
distinct,
much.
you have a distinct style that I've seen in all five of your movies.
Oh, cool.
Um, and in
I'm not
this
even
one,
aware of
yeah,
it.
no, you can tell a Brad Furman movie. There's just there's always hip hop music. There's always a certain look. There's certain color palette. Um, and in this one, you got to take us back to the '90s, back
Yeah.
to the scene of the crimes. And one thing I loved is that you didn't try to recreate the iconic news footage from back then. You used the real news footage,
Yeah.
and I thought it makes the whole movie feel more real. It's almost like you're watching a documentary of the time. And we don't just see real footage of Tupac and Biggie performing. We see the Rodney King beating. We see the O.J. Simpson car chase and trial. We see the real Johnny Cochran. You put us right into 1990s Los Angeles. So what was that like to do a 90s period piece?
I mean, all that period stuff's fun. I like going back and carving those worlds out and bringing them to life. I think with this story, similar to what I was saying a moment ago, when you look at a movie, it does live in a way in some version of like movie land that we think movies are fake.
Mm-hmm.
If it suspends reality and, in the moment. But this is so larger than that from the perspective of, you can go to the corner of Wilshire and Fairfax, and that's actually where Biggie was shot and subsequently passed at Cedar Sinai. And as I stated earlier, Miss Wallace having lost a son. So there's a gravity of the truth and the reality of what occurred. And I felt, again, a responsibility to everybody who loved Biggie, to Miss Wallace and her son, and to Christopher and the Pools, to try to root the movie as best as we could in some type of reality and have it be raw and really honest.
Mm-hmm.
The effort to do that was thereby to not try to have a fake Biggie that you can never capture, his iconography and how special he is, or not try to recreate a Tupac,
Mm-hmm.
but to use their real imagery, and that extends beyond just them as individuals, but into, as you said, the world of Johnny Cochran and O.J. Simpson and the world of Rodney King and what was happening with the Los Angeles police and the city at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to find a balance between making a movie that was intriguing and entertaining, that allowed me, because the movie is based off of Randall Sullivan's book Labyrinth.
Mm-hmm.
But the Labyrinth book was over a decade old, so I did a full-blown reinvestigation into the case with Sergio Robledo. Sergio sadly has passed away. He was the lead investigator for the Wallace civil case,
Right.
as well as he was Russell Poole's supervisor for a large portion of Russell's tenure at the LAPD. So I was given access to, redacted files, the regular files, depositions, everything under the sun. Even when you won't know, but there's a guy named Psycho Mike who's on the TV when Forrest walks in, his Jack Jackson walks in with Russ Poole watching the TV, Johnny's character. That's just a little bit of a wink and nod to all of the things. You meet Mike later in the movie on Top of the Hill in Boyle Heights, but there's just so many things in the movie that we just couldn't get in. So I just kept trying to find these nuggets of truth and, put them together, and to do it without upending the account and facts that we had uncovered in what it was. And again, this is, our account of the events based off
Right.
of the research we did. So
Yeah, and for people who don't know, so in 1997, an LAPD detective named Russell Poole, who's played by Johnny Depp, worked the homicide investigation for the murders of both Tupac and Biggie. And then 2 decades after that, after Poole had retired, a reporter named Jack Jackson, who was played by Forrest Whitaker, like you said, he teams up with Poole to discover the truth. And so that's what, like you said, the book Labyrinth was about. The labyrinth, the L and the A are
yeah,
capitalized for Los Angeles. But you, to make this movie, you had to reinvestigate the case, right? Because it shows 2015, that year in Poole's life, and it flashes back and forth and shows us, what happened back in 97 in terms of the investigation, and then their reinvestigation, and then the information that you found out that you can infuse into there. So it's so many
Yeah,
angles, looking at it in ways that we had never even known about.
and it's interesting because in actuality, and I'll let people watch the movie, but as you know from having seen it, Russ's story really starts actually with Liga Gaines
Mm-hmm.
and everything that ends up being the Rampart scandal, fact or fiction, which then ultimately leads to Biggie, which then sort of led to Pac, and then really just stays with Biggie, because he's only looking into the Pac case because of the ties that connect to Biggie, and Christopher's murder, but it was one of those instances where, and I think Johnny said it really well in an interview. Russ Pool's basically saying to Miss Wallace, like, I'll find and get justice for the murder of your son.
Mm-hmm.
I'll find the person, but in actuality, you pull that string, and it's not a person; it's an institution and all these other things. So, it's a wild, wild story. I always just focus in filmmaking on being me. When we're younger and we aspire, you think, oh man, like Oliver Stone or JFK or Spike Lee, and do the right things.
Mm-hmm.
But I did just try to take my own approach into reinvestigating the case and figuring out how to present this as a movie in a manner, in a way that, would be intriguing, meaningful, and for some it would move them emotionally, for some it would anger them, and I've had others complain at me that there wasn't enough other things. So you can't win with everyone. That's just the nature of filmmaking.
Yeah.
But you give it your best shot, and that's what we try to do here. It's been a real honor.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting is, people think they know everything there is to know about the case, and it's unsolved, and we just took them on their word. Oh, it's unsolved. And we've just kind of gone on believing that all this time. But your movie, asks the question, is it really unsolved?
Well,
And
it's funny, and just to interject, because
yeah.
I've spoken to some people of this, because I always try to credit um, the former football player from the Seattle Seahawks, Bennett. He was being interviewed. It was right after Tom Brady's jersey was stolen, and
Mm,
Brady's jersey from the Super Bowl a few years past was missing for like 24 to 48 hours, and he was like, because the government had put the FBI on it, and they tracked it down in Mexico City, and then they
right.
got the jersey back and they represented it to Tom, and it was like a whole big thing. And Michael Bennett was like, you could find Tom Brady's jersey with the FBI in 24 hours, but it's been 20 plus years and you can't solve the murders of Pac and Biggie. And it just puts in perspective in a big way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's true. It's like I thought we knew everything there was to know, and then I watched your movie, and I was like, there was way more to it than we knew.
And there's
And
more, which is even crazier. It's just, we ended up linking up with the FBI detective who was, the lead detective on the FBI side, who was investigating the LAPD and the case. And that blew open some real holes for us of things. Just, you can't fit everything in a movie. So we'll see what we do with that information, but we did give it to the Wallace family. So,
yeah, so let's talk about the process of making this movie, because that's what I like to get into with
yeah, yeah, sure.
my actor and director friends. So I remember when the book was like floating around town as something that might be getting turned into a movie, and weren't there like big names involved or looking at it back then?
Yeah, I think there were two major studio options on it. From my understanding, Stallone also, I think, had an option. I think DiCaprio's company had an option, and Will Smith's. I don't, I can't speak to fact on those things,
Mm-hmm.
but that's how it's come back to me. But yeah, I could never just. Part of the reason I have some insight is I tried for about a decade to get the rights to the book, and I couldn't, just because of stature of where I was at, financial, and other people had the option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there was a script on the blacklist in 2015 called Labyrinth, based on the book, and so it was something that I feel like a lot of people wanted to see get made, but maybe they weren't sure if it ever could get made because it might have been controversial. So how did you finally, get involved and get it made?
It's like the most backwards way ever. So basically, we spent 10 years trying to get it. We're unable. And then Don Sikorsky, my dear friend, who's, a pretty hard hitting investigative journalist, he found me the Infiltrator book. I had hooked him
Mm-hmm.
up when we were making the Infiltrator with Miriam Siegel of Good Films. And Don had been working on a bunch of things with Miriam that had sort of come out of Infiltrator. And, unbeknownst to me, because Miriam had I would assume a positive experience on The Infiltrator, and it felt so good about the movie. She went and optioned, I guess, when it came up, because she had heard and known it from Don and I, Labyrinth, and they were working on it. So Christian Contreras was cast as a small role as an actor in Infiltrator, and I had met, wonderful human being. I had met him as well through Miriam. So my gift, so to speak, flying back from London to the States, was this script that she had given me in a manila envelope. And I opened it up, and I was a bit of a confusing moment, because usually the way I like to approach material is I want to build it from the ground up.
Right.
I want to do it grassroots. So to have a script handed to me was a little confounding. The sentiment of it was really beautiful. The fact that she had the rights was really wonderful, but I was a little perplexed at the moment in time. I ended up not actually engaging with the project then, and she had gone off, I believe, with another filmmaker in a completely different direction, and then came back to me a year later. And I was pretty strict about certain things that I wanted, one of which was I didn't want to play the international sales game with the casting. I really only wanted to make the movie with Johnny Depp, and I knew getting a guy like Depp was a long shot, but I also knew that there was just something in my gut that made me feel that this was right for Johnny at this time in his life. And the notion of him getting back to a really real, honest, raw character, a la Donnie Brasco in a way. There were just a lot of things, his love of music, things that we actually ended up connecting on. But that's really where it started. And then, so it was a year after the script was given to me, I re-engaged. Subsequently, Miriam built a relationship with Johnny's agent at the time, Tracy Jacobs, who I actually also knew because I was an assistant years ago at ICM.
Right.
I was there 1 year for a woman named Sue Leibman, and I got to work closely with Sam Cohn and Elaine Goldsmith Thomas at the time. But I also knew Tracy, and it's been nice for me because there's a lot of agents who've grown in their careers, like Tony Howard and Chris Andrews and Tracy Brennan and tons of people. Actually, Joanne Colonna, who's Forrest's manager today, was also an agent at ICM.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, a big network of people that I met when I was an assistant. And I think the assistant story, to be an assistant on an agent's desk and then subsequently later, have some of the things happen that I've managed to manifest. At least it seems like in theory I can earn their respect. Not all of
Totally.
them. But so that's how it really began for me. I got that script. I waited a year. We ended up with Tracy Jacobs. My meeting with Johnny was meant, usually a typical actor meeting, if they're interested, if you're lucky, an hour and a half. I met with him 9 hours in West Hollywood at his office.
No
Nine
way.
and a half to, yeah, I got there at 1 and I left at 10:30 p.m. that night out of his office. And we chatted about everything. We connected on personal, on movies, on everything. And he was just humble and interesting and a real artist, and really was connected to his point of view on Russ Poole. And we really discussed it all. So I left knowing that he was in and we were making the movie, and it was a hell of a day. Plus it's like, to me now, Johnny's become a friend, and he's very human and all these other things. But it's hard with all these things. When I worked for Julia Roberts and I was her assistant, the poster, one of the posters in my office that was given to me was like a Matthew McConaughey poster. So,
Wow.
you're like a kid, 20 years old, working as an assistant to a movie star, and, you're surrounded by these other movie stars. You don't necessarily think you're going to end up working with them, but you strive to do good work, and hopefully it begets good people, and, so on and so forth.
So the meeting with Johnny Depp, so you were already attached to direct it. So was that more he had read the script and he wanted to play the role? It was just for you to get to know each other?
Yeah, as I said, it was a year later from when I got the script. I re-engaged with the project. I had a list of 4 things that were like, I'm not making this movie unless I get these 4 things, kind of thing, which I had never done before. It was a line in the sand kind of thing for me. Johnny was top of the list.
Yeah.
And I went to meet with Johnny under the auspices. He had read the script and was interested.
Okay.
His sister, Christy Dombrowski, who's like most wonderful human being, was managing him. And, she introduced me, and I went into his office, and was this incredibly cool rock star, like rock and roll eccentric, office that was just, it was just really awesome.
Oh, cool.
But you don't feel like you're having an outer body experience talking to someone. You just feel like you're talking to a regular guy, and
Yeah.
he treated me the same way, and we really connected on a human level, and he was in. So it was a big day.
Yeah. I have to ask, what were the 4 things? One was Johnny Depp.
I don't know if I could tell you them.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because they're slightly critical of some people and certain things. So
Okay.
I don't want to offend anybody, but
Okay, you can tell
they
me
know who
off.
they are and what. Yeah, for sure. You'll appreciate them off camera.
Okay. Well, another thing I heard is that you wanted to make sure you had the blessing of Biggie's family, Christopher Wallace's family,
Yeah, that was
before you.
actually that was par and parcel to this the insanity of this. Miriam had the rights, but had no relationship or contact with the estates, the record label of Pac or
Mhm.
Biggie, the estates of Pac and Biggie. I didn't, in good conscience, it was so many things. There was just no way or world I was making this movie without the support of Miss Wallace. And Pac in particular had really been a large influence on me starting at age 19. And I was such a fan of Afeni Shakur. And I had learned so much about her as a Black Panther and her being pregnant in jail with Pac. And, you know, the sort of the psychological elements of how that impacted her and how she raised her son. And there were just all these things. So there's still family, obviously, that's alive. There's people that run the estate, like Tom
Mhm.
Wally and Molly. And I just, I just had to make the extra effort to get their approvals. I told Ms. Wallace I wouldn't make the movie if, you know, she didn't want me to or wasn't supportive. And I met her. I had gotten her number in a really unique way, and I cold called her. And what's funny is, I was actually I have a membership to the Soho House that I feel like I never used. And I was out on the balcony on the other side, and on a whim, because I had had the number burning a hole in my pocket, and I was nervous because the processes had started on the movie. And as I said, in good conscience, I just couldn't make the movie. And I knew if I walked off, I was going to be like, you know, the asshole. And I didn't want to be that guy, but I also knew I had to follow my heart. And I
Mhm.
called her and she picked up, and it was a really emotional call for both of us. I was just really emotional and raw and vulnerable and a little concerned and scared. And, um, you know, just explained to her my heart and hoped that she was accepting of it. And she was. And we built this long friendship where we would talk all the time, and it continued for about 6 to 9 months, during which I got up the guts to ask her to play herself in the movie.
Wow.
And she laughed me off. She thought that was hilarious and told me she's not an actor and to go to Angela Bassett because she had done it successfully before. And I
Yeah.
sort of accepted the answer at face value. But I, part of what you were asking me earlier, I really wanted to humanize Christopher and humanize Pac. It's one of the reasons it's brief, but we take a moment of silence in the middle of the movie for Pac. And I was just trying to find ways to have us as human beings connect with them, because I think in the iconography of a Christopher or Biggie
Mhm.
or Pac, people forget they're real. They forget that they're real people, and this is a real mother who lost a son. So that's why I expressed to her when we finally met in New York City a year later, or 9 months later, I think. I had said, I just explained to her why I thought it was important for her to represent herself and the significance it would have for the story, the truth, the fight for justice, and humanizing Christopher, and all of the elements. So that's sort of how that ended up coming to fruition.
Wow. What was that meeting like when you finally met in person?
It was really beautiful. Sergio Robledo, who I had mentioned earlier, flew out with us. And because Sergio was the lead investigator on the Wallace civil case, he had a deep bond of trust. Also, who came into my life on that day was Wayne Barrow. Wayne
Mm.
was Biggie's former manager, and he runs the Wallace estate. So pretty much anything that you're dealing with Miss Wallace on, Wayne oversees everything, calls all the shots. Um, as you know, I was dealing directly with Miss Wallace. So I had heard a lot about Wayne, but I had never met with him.
Mhm.
And Wayne is just a tremendous power broker. He's an amazing human being, and I see why Miss Wallace trusts him so much, and you know, is almost like seems like a second son to her.
Yeah.
And my pitch was to Wayne and to Miss Wallace on all facets of the movie, because also I had ideas with music. They gave me Biggie's a cappella vocals, and I worked with my friend Alberto Boff, and we produced this weird hybrid of like sort of hip hop, but it's also like experimental. It's just this really unique score, but like source music that we laid Biggie's vocals into.
Yeah.
So I made Biggie a part of the score in a way on like 3 or 4 cues, and they were really game to allow me to do that and create that. And then in the end title track, we created Chris Hajian, the composer, who just did a really brilliant emotional score. because he's like a second half to a whole in theory. He worked with Tristan Clopay, and they did these beautiful strings and emotional orchestral stuff that we weave Biggie's vocals in for the end. So there's a lot of elements of, Warner Brothers and approvals and getting Biggie's vocals and
Yeah.
the support we needed on the movie and the support we needed from the estate. And I mean, there's no world I was making this movie without them, and there's no way I could, the way I wanted to make the movie, I couldn't make it without them. That was the other thing,
Right.
which I didn't actually realize. I guess I realized it in theory, but not until practice, when like you see how much Wayne has done for the movie, and you see how much his partner Elliot has done for the film, and how much Mrs. Wallace has done. When you see all the imprint of these individuals, yeah, I couldn't have done it without them.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That what a great story. So let's talk about the rest of the incredible cast that you got for this. So,
sure,
like you
sure.
said, Johnny Depp plays Russell Poole. I do want to say, I think it's hard to think of many actors who disappear into a role like Johnny Depp does, like our entire lives. He's played so many different kinds of roles in so many so many different kinds of movies. I think for me, he'll always be Edward Scissorhands. I think that was
Yeah,
the first time he made like such an impact
Many.
on me
Yeah,
as a kid.
yeah,
But he's also a three-time Oscar nominee: Pirates of the Caribbean, Finding Neverland, Sweeney Todd, and those are all such different, unique roles. What's your favorite Johnny Depp movie or movies?
I think it was probably what I mentioned, probably Donnie Brasco.
Yeah.
I mean, What's Eating Gilbert Grape? He's
Oh
pretty amazing
yeah,
too. I
I
mean,
love that too.
he's just brilliant. My thing with him when we sat in that long meeting, which I was nervous to bring up, was I had such a clear vision of the raw, like natural, honest Russ Poole, which are words that you keep hearing associated with the movie, that I didn't want any prosthetics for this movie, because he
Mm,
had played a real character in Whitey Bulger in Black Mass,
right.
and I think he's brilliant in Black Mask, but I didn't love what they did with his eye color and how they changed it, because
Hmm.
I thought it went too far. And I presented to him this notion of not using prosthetics, because
Right.
we had to go. I mean, prosthetics were an obvious choice for this movie because you're waffling between, the 2015 timeline and years earlier. So it just seems to make sense that you're not going to get, I mean, in an ideal world, I would have like had him put on, 70 pounds and like, give me $100 million and there's a
Yeah.
million. But on an independent film, in the way where it just was never going to happen. But I didn't want to go the prosthetic route. I wanted to go old school, like naturalistic makeup, and really figure out what the looks were and things like that. And he was really game. But there was a little. He when we ended that meeting, it was the only thing he said. Let me think about
Oh
it.
wow.
Yeah, it was
Well,
the only thing he didn't give on. He said, "Let me think about it." And then like I didn't hear from him for like a few weeks, and I was like scratching my head, and we had makeup tests, and they got pushed, and I was like, but we figured it out eventually. But I care so much that I can't help but to like sweat certain decisions. So
yeah.
like the fact that he hit the whole button on me, like I get it because he has his process. He was working on other things, but I internalize them in a way that like they eat at me a bit. And
Yeah.
and so again, it all worked out, but I was anxious about it.
Yeah, but I mean, also you want him to look as much like Russell Poole as you can, but not look like Johnny Depp at all. You don't want to completely disguise him. So I think you found that
Yeah,
happy
it,
medium.
it's a little bit of a weird thing. The other thing is I wanted to make a movie where you weren't just like, oh, Johnny Depp, Forrest
Yeah,
Whitaker. So a lot of that had to come down to the execution of like how I shot it, what their makeup was, like a lot. Like I removed all the conventional marks when they're talking. I didn't use any marks. Like I purposely had the operators dance with them, and they can move however they want it. And I did that because I felt like Johnny's probably pretty. It was, again, these are theories. You never know until you try them. But my theory was that if we all watch Johnny Depp movies, and Johnny's filming all these movies, pretty much they're all like some version of, here's your mark, you got to hit your mark, you have to say your line, shot, reverse shot. This was pretty much in theory like how movies are made. So I figured like that'll work for Johnny and that'll be in all his movies. But
right.
so my theory was, let's throw all that out. And like literally, I remember when we were shooting the apartment stuff, like when we went to block it, I was like, you can do whatever you want. And he loved that. He thought that was so fun that I didn't confine them at all. And then you naturally get in rhythms and patterns because if you're going to cover it a second time or third time, you need them to then hit those marks. But
Right.
for the blocking, I just, let them sort of run free and wild. And there were times during the later things we kept the marks out even further and just let them play. But
That's cool.
it was all in the DNA of wanting to just create something that felt not only grounded, real, raw, and honest, but also like allowed you to drop in with him as Russ Poole and not be enamored with the Johnny Depp of it all.
Right. And so once you have Johnny Depp, does that help you get Forrest Whitaker when he's a
1,000% in this instance,
yeah,
because um, I mean, they had worked together in Platoon. Um,
that's right.
and so as a result of that, they wanted to work together again. So it became a very quick natural fit. And Forrest, we had an opportunity. It appeared on the tape when the version of the role was older to have Forrest play Tyrese Gibson's role. And I really, really wanted him. And funny enough, he won an Oscar a year later for Last King of Scotland.
Right.
But a lot of things transpired where it didn't go in that direction. Then the role became younger, and William Morris at the time was pitching Ludacris and 50 Cent. And I had known Tyrese for years and felt like I wanted Tyrese to play a dark character, so I went in that direction. But
Yeah.
I felt like I was pretty close to getting Forrest at that time, so he had been on my radar. Dating back to Bird and all the wonderful films he did, and I always wanted to work with him, so it was a natural fit.
Yeah, you mentioned, yes, he was Best Actor for Last King of Scotland. So now you're dealing with three-time Oscar nominee Johnny Depp, Oscar winner Forrest Whitaker. You were probably thrilled, right, when you got that piece of casting? I mean, it's such a great. That has so much to do with movies getting made, movies getting distribution. Is the actors sometimes like the life or death of a movie hinges on casting?
Well, it's a weird thing. I won't. There's a particular actor that I had earmarked and in mind for this role before Forrest. I haven't spoken about it. I won't say their name,
Okay.
but that's where my head was at for who Jack Jackson was. And I didn't really think getting Forrest was realistic. My head was sort of set on another actor. And then the Forrest thing, like I said, it happened really fast. And I sat down with Forrest, and it made sense from a creative perspective. It made sense from a Johnny Forrest perspective. It made sense from the distributor, Open Road, at the time, no longer our distributor, but it just made sense. And you have to find a balance in these things. But I mean, how in my position making a movie, you get Forrest Whitaker, who's just a brilliant talent. You just don't say no to those things. So
Yeah, definitely. And so let's talk about some of the rest of the cast. A friend of mine, actually, Shamir Anderson, plays David Mack, which is a great role. That's a person I never even knew about who was involved in the case, corrupt LAPD cop. Shea
how do
Wiggum,
you
yeah,
know Shakir?
I think because of you. I think it
Oh
somehow,
wow, it must be actually. That's super cool.
but I'm not exactly sure though because I met him one night at Bootsy Bellows. He was at the door and I got him in. And I don't know if you texted me and said, "Can you get him in?" I don't exactly remember, but he's one of the first things he said to me was, "I'm in LA. I just shot this movie, which is now called City of Lies, and so it had to be 2017." And I said, "Oh my god, my friend Brad Furman directed that." He's like, "I love Brad Furman. He like owed you his career. How did you find Shamir?"
Shamir's story is really interesting because I'm a big advocate of the auditioning process, and
Yeah.
I don't remember the number of what Ed Norton was in Primal Fear when they were searching for that role. It might have been some insane number. Our insane number was Shamir was 186.
Wow.
Yeah, I just couldn't figure out how to find the right David Mack. I mean, we found wonderful actors, but I was steadfast that the Mack role was just as significant as the others, but potentially just it was like a rocket ship of a role.
Yeah.
And we were really blessed due to the subject matter that we had incredible prominent Black actors wanting to play the role, but I just felt like we needed to find the right person, and it wasn't about your level of fame or what you had or hadn't done. I'm not a if you notice I haven't taken advantage in my career of like just like name placing famous actors in my movies. I really try to find the best character actors, and that was another thing. It was par and parcel to the Forrest Johnny thing. I'm like, I have these two mega stars in the movie. I'm like, well, like I don't know fact or fiction, but like I'd heard, oh, like Drake wants to audition, and like, this one wants to audition, and
Right.
I like I just was like, that'll throw the DNA of this movie way off. Like I don't we don't need distractions. We need to like be rooted into something. So um I I mean, we even had Miguel audition for a role. I mean,
Oh, no
and
way.
I'm like the biggest Miguel fan ever. I've been to his concert, like just crazy things. And it wasn't about like Miguel was bad or good. He was fine. He was great. I was never moving in that direction. And respectfully to those artists and people who had come up, as potential auditions, um, you know, they just shouldn't have been put, they should have been notified in advance that we just weren't casting, names for those roles, because I wanted to create a world that was real. Like, even I'm a huge fan of Glenn Plummer and Shea Wiggum. Like, those guys are like uber famous in their own right, because Shea's in so many movies and like Glenn Plummer's been around forever. But I felt that they were character enough. Even Toby Huss, I didn't actually know all of Toby's work, but like,
Right.
I, it was just the kind of thing again where I felt they could disappear into the roles. So I sort of bent my rules a little bit. Like, Shamir was perfect. Nobody really knew who he was, hadn't done anything. He was like from Toronto. Like, he was just perfect. If I
Right.
could have done all of roles just like that, I probably would have, and then just had Forrest and Johnny, and you get lost in Russ and Jack Jackson. But, you have to find the best actors. So that's what I leaned into. So.
Absolutely. So what's funny about Shamir? I first meet him. He tells me he did your movie. We bond, over our adoration for you. And he says he's from Toronto. So I'm like, oh, I know another actor from Toronto, Stefan James. And he's like, that's my brother. And I had no idea because they have different last names. So I was like, no way.
That's
So I was literally like, do you know this guy? And he's like, yeah, he's my brother.
that's pretty amazing.
But what a talented actor! And since he did your movie, he did movies with Nicole Kidman. He's everywhere. Now he has a new one with Anna Kendrick on Netflix, The Stowaway. His career is just taking off. But you found him on a tape from Toronto.
So he was in South Africa filming something, and he put himself on tape. And just because, again, it had been a long ride, I insisted that he had to come in. I
Oh
wasn't
wow!
willing to cast the Mac role just off a tape.
Right.
I don't know. My attention to detail is unique. So,
That's a good thing.
as a result, I was very precious with every role, and every role, everybody really, really earned it. Let me put it that way.
Cool. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
You also have, like you said, Shea Wiggum is another LAPD cop who gets himself in trouble. He's been in a bunch of your movies. Rockmond Dunbar, who I worked with on Prison Break, he plays Dreadlocks.
Uh-huh.
And Lawrence Mason, who's been in all your movies, is probably like
Yeah.
your good luck charm. He plays Dutton. I met him with you at that Take DVD release party.
Yeah.
Are there just certain people you seem like such a loyal friend and director that you're reading a script, you're like, oh, that's gonna be him. Oh, that's gonna be him.
That did happen with Shea Wiggum and Liga. It's probably the first words I'm still old school. I print out my scripts that and I'll get my pen and mark them up.
I like that.
It's in the DNA of how I started evaluating material.
Yeah.
Um, so in that instance, yes, Lawrence is just an incredibly special actor. No
Yeah.
different than Shea. But the funny thing about Lawrence, and this is if you want a slight tangent, I
Yeah.
was casting for the take, and we were in West Hollywood in this teeny casting room. We were a very small movie made for a couple $100,000.
Hmm.
And Lawrence Mason comes in and auditions for one of the roles, and I'm freaking out because I'm like, oh my god, that's the guy from True Romance.
Right.
I'm like, and it's my first movie, and the guy from I was like, I couldn't even. And what was really crazy about the scene is the scenes, the sides, the dialogue on the sides start, but in actuality, they just start, and there's like a knock on the door, and then they start. And Lawrence comes into the scene. He sits down in the chair, and he says he's ready, and they roll the camera, a little video camera, and Aaron Griffith is the casting director for that film. And all of a sudden, Lawrence starts basically masturbating,
Mm.
and it gets like pretty heavy, and he's rubbing his neck, and he's like super into it, and I'm like, uncomfortable would not even be a word to describe what I'm feeling. I'm perplexed, uncomfortable, confused. I was just having a fan moment.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, he stomps his foot twice on the floor, which is the equivalent of the knock at the door, and he goes right into the lines. but I couldn't hear or think about anything he said in the lines because I just couldn't figure out the whole masturbation thing. Like it was all so unique to me.
Yeah.
But again, as I said, my attention to detail is so insane. I went back and looked at every single audition on tape because we had taped them. And when
Right.
I went back and saw his, far and away, he was the most brilliant. Like that was a way in for him. And I've learned with actors that, you know, you have to go into these auditions and to separate yourself, you take risks and you take chances. And he had added that he was basically in his house jerking off. And then there's a knock at the door and the guy's coming for the money. Like, and that's being creative. But I'm just completely inspired by him and his risk taking. And I also felt that he's now this old school heavyweight and Shamir's like this young heavyweight. So the idea
Yeah.
of them head to head was really interesting for me. Um, and that was one of the other reasons I leaned in that direction. So I'm really fortuitous to have, in a world of like very cutthroat filmmaking with a lot of politics and things that I'm not interested in, to have some incredibly loyal actor friends and people that are so talented that have believed in me enough to come and do it again and again. So I try to support that as well.
Yeah, I love that. That's a very unique story. I mean, that's you never know what an actor's motivation is going to be or what backstory they create for themselves.
Yeah,
Uh,
and he showed it. And looking back, I and having learned a lot about the auditioning process and actors and
yeah.
acting, it's a great choice. You have to take risks. There's a great Sam Rockwell interview where he talks about taking risks, and he's like, I either bomb an audition or I'm brilliant in it. It's not, there's no in between. And I think Lawrence comes from that same school of thought.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, I mean the casting's great. Everyone feels real, even the big movie stars. How would you explain the genre of the movie? Because it's almost like a mystery, even though it's a true story that we know, and it's also a detective drama. But it's how would you describe it?
Well, it's interesting. It's quite a smart observation you made from the perspective of I it is multi-genre. If you date back to the take
Yeah.
is basically a heist thriller, but embedded in it and Trojan horse in it is a drama of this family and this
Hmm.
guy who, you know, got shot in the head and is now trying to figure his life out. So it's a tweener. And
Hmm.
I've been a big believer for a long time that where movies need to go are what I call genreless,
Mm.
where they're multi-genre and multifaceted in genre. I believe we need to subvert expectations in our filmmaking today because these classic stories being retold over and over again, we've seen every version of it. So if you're getting into a movie where you're subverting expectations, I think it's important. This isn't really that, but you are correct in the sense that this is genreless from the point of it's many elements of many genres. It has
Yeah.
a dramatic element. It has the, you know, sort of the element of the investigation and all these other elements of it. So therefore, as a result of that, it's multifaceted in that regard from that
Yeah.
perspective, which is
Yeah.
tricky because we live in a world where the business wants to define everything, whether it's an individual or whether it's, you know, the film that, and put it in a box because that's how things are sold.
Yeah.
So that's what actually forces that to happen. But um, I think things are changing, and I'm embarking on some really unique things that hopefully will be a part of changing that in my own work. And this is, like I said in the beginning of chatting, that this is really like a demarcation of time for me of like how things are going to change moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of genres, in our lifetime alone, we've seen dramedy become a thing. You know, it used to be you were
Yeah,
either a drama or a comedy,
yeah.
and I was glad when dramedy became a thing in movies and TV because I like both. I like dramas, I like comedies, and it feels more real, like a slice of life when you have both elements. You know?
Yeah, I don't think there should be. I like. It's funny because I'm just chatting, but like Depp said to me in our first meeting, I have an allergy to formula,
Hmm.
and that always stuck with me because I really agree with that. I mean, I know that art and commerce have to work together. I understand that there was a world that like Rocky was never going to come out, and you know,
Wow.
having, you know, knowing Irwin Winkler, he went to great lengths and manipulated and lied and did all these crazy things. Well, maybe in his words, he didn't lie, but he definitely manipulated from the stories he shared with me about how to get a studio to distribute the movie. And it turns out to be one of, not in my opinion, one of the greatest movies of all time, but one of the most financially successful. Like you
Yeah.
have to find that marriage. I mean, Goodfellas, for example, also another Irwin film with Marty, like that movie didn't test at all. Like it tested like under 60%. So, but again, financially a really successful movie. So these movies, you have to figure out how to balance the art and the commerce. And I don't
Right.
think it should be, if you're making something that is art or artistic in that manner, it's like, how do you figure these things out? And these are tricky things with tricky questions of the world we're playing in. So, I think you just got to, like I said, keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah,
Just
and I
make,
also
make what's in your heart.
exactly right, exactly. And you filmed the movie in 2017. It was originally supposed to come out in 2018. So what exactly, like, what can you talk about in terms of why it got delayed? Because there's been so much speculation, but I feel like you can actually set the record straight. I mean, at first it was that a company went bankrupt, then the company was blaming Johnny Depp, and then there was a rumor like the LAPD didn't want it to come out.
Everything and anything you could think of truly has this film has gone through.
Yeah,
Ultimately, the larger forces that I can speak of, I can say Open Road, which I thought was, look, I love Tom Ortenberg, was the perfect distributor for our movie. They had distributed Spotlight successfully and had won
yeah,
awards. I felt like we couldn't be a better fit. They were really bullish on the movie. They had a partner who, wanted to, had a large ownership in the company, and they wanted to make some real changes in the company, and they had to sell the company. And Tom was rushing to get the movie out, so it would be the last movie he released under Open Road. And unfortunately, due to a lot of other forces, wasn't able to do that. So then Donald Tang and Global Road, which I think was I Am Global merging with Open Road, created
okay,
Global Road. They had to raise about 300 to 400 million to distribute all of their movies. We would be on that slate. We were sort of like an adopted child of theirs in this,
mm,
acquisition. But they ended up not being able to raise the money and went bankrupt.
right,
And then we ended up on the shelf of a bank for a long time. But I had, from day one of talking to some people privately, it publicly being announced that I was going to do the movie, I had a lot of people, some directly from the LAPD, some through people. Randall Sullivan and I had done this podcast. Well, he actually did it, and I was there. And I had this woman who worked at police department, and then somebody else from the sheriff's office, separate events, slipped me cards to speak to them privately.
wow,
I had gotten some threats about not making the movie and warnings. I had people basically telling me this was much bigger than I realized and not to touch it. And these all became larger reasons to do the movie, actually, than the opposite, because I felt like, wow, this story really needs to be told. And then in doing it in conjunction with the Poole family, with the Wallaces, with Randall Sullivan, and Sergio Robledo and his family, it just gave me the confidence to stick on the path we were on and just focus on the art and the storytelling and the reinvestigation, so to speak, from our point of view as filmmakers and journalists, in a way.
yeah,
And that's where we just kept moving.
right. Well, 3 years later, like all good Hollywood
Pretty
endings,
crazy, right? Yeah, I know.
it has a
I'm
happy
still
ending.
here. Yeah, there was a time it was a little like I was looking over my shoulder for a bit, but I don't know. I mean, like I keep saying, I think I'm so insignificant in this, in the sense of like, this story and is so much bigger than me. And even the choice of Johnny and Forrest, because you made note, and I appreciate that you enjoyed their performances. Really, like, they're them and myself, but more them. They're just vessels to Trojan horse the larger messages of the movie. I felt that if you could take this subject matter and the injustices of it, and now what's going on in the world, and we're, with the George Floyd trial and just
Right,
everything in the world, and Black Lives Matter, like, and again, this was years prior to, the larger movements of social justice that are going on, which are obviously really positive.
right,
um, my theory was, what better way to serve the world these messages than through these vessels of a Whitaker and a Depp? And that was always my theory. And it was also a way of not only Trojan horsing the messaging, but it's a way to get major distribution and marketing and big dollars behind it. So you
right.
got to play the system and beat the system in its own game. So there was a marriage of these things that I thought really worked. I'll never get to play that hand in the way that I intended to on the big stage, because the movie wasn't released theatrically in 3,500 screens the way it was intended to. We never had, Johnny and Forrest out in front of the press the way we planned. Like, all these things that we planned to do, we didn't have. So being in a COVID world and having a COVID theatrical and having this like smaller limited theatrical, and then the VOD coming this Friday, and
Hmm.
it's just been a unique world with a unique terrain. But as we started this interview, for me, it was like, you know what? I made a movie. I made it for the world. I made it for people to see. That's got to be what this is about. And now it's finally out there. So it's a big sigh of relief. And it's a bit surreal too.
Yeah, totally. And
Yeah.
I bet there was a point where you were like, "Is this ever going to see the light of day?"
I wondered for a long time, and then I just tried to make peace with it and not let it like tear me up, and just focus on moving forward. And I never let it go. I fought really, really, really hard. I took off directing and writing and producing for about a year, probably foolishly so. But I had felt that I gave my word to, like when you're talking to Russ's kids and they're like, "Hey, what's happening with the movie?" and you don't have any answer, like it would have been real easy for me to just take another job, go make another movie. I I didn't feel right about that. No different than I didn't feel right about making the movie without Miss Wallace. Like Wayne would ask me too, what's going on with the movie? I had no answers. So the
Yeah,
way to get answers is just proactively go in the world and do it. So I basically became a banker for like a year. I
right.
mean, I met crazy high net worth individuals. I traveled, I talked to everyone. I built so many inroads to people who have real capital and access to capital that, maybe one day I should figure out how to capitalize on that. But
Yeah,
it was singularly just about, do you want to buy my movie?
yeah.
Like, are you interested in buying my movie? It was a wild ride.
Yeah, well, that makes sense though that you had to complete this project and get it out to the world before you could move on to the next. You still had a job you wanted to finish.
Yeah, and I didn't expect. It's funny. Al Ruddy, who produced The Godfather and has
Mm,
been a dear friend and mentor to me. I went to my former manager's birthday, and Al was the seat next to me, and he grabbed me on the leg, and he's close to 90 now, and he's really strong, and he grabbed me and he said, What's this shit I hear about you banking and finances? You're a filmmaker, kid." He's like, you tell great stories, He's like, "You're like one of our classic 70s guys. You got to go out there and work and tell stories." And
yeah,
hearing those words from a guy who produced The Godfather, just, it's like, I feel awkward even saying them out loud, because I'm like, I just try to be me and make movies. But, you
I
know,
love
I,
hearing that.
it's the kind of thing where it really did move me. I felt like he was right. And I don't want to regret the year I spent doing that stuff. I know I did it for the right reasons, but it was hard. It was really challenging. I woke up every day spending, 9, 10, 11 hours a day working the phones and running from here to there to meet people. I mean, honest to God, I have a list of probably 500 people, of like high net worth people that I spoke to at some point about this film. So it was wild. And that's just like tip of the iceberg, and not dealing with the politics. I mean, I had one company that's a public company that released a huge movie. And they were basically going to buy it and put 30 million of marketing behind it. And I thought we hit like the lottery with how this was going to play out.
Yeah,
And then they were like, "Well, we had a big meeting, and because we're a public company and the Beverly Hills Police Department's right down the way, we're not going to be able to do it." And I was like, because the board had to weigh in. And
mm,
like that, this movie's been associated with the stigma of risk and fear and things people just don't want to touch. So it's been really tricky.
wow. Well, maybe you got to trust timing sometimes, and maybe it will have an even greater impact now if people watch it through the lens of a post George Floyd, post Black Lives Matter movement
Yeah.
world. And then so you obviously your hard work paid off because you got Saban Films came in and they bought it,
Yeah.
distributed it.
I look, I give these guys a lot of credit. Working with the bank is really tricky. I know a ton about banking and bankruptcy and all these different things now. I give Saban a lot of credit for sticking their nose to the grindstone, for really believing in the movie, for really believing in me, for fighting to get the movie out. There was a lot of adversity from all different sides, most of which I can't speak on, and they hung with it, and
Mhm.
they partnered with Lionsgate for the release. And I give everybody really a lot of credit, and I'm very honored that, and happy that it's coming out. But I truly, it's weird. If I'm talking to you about a movie, it's
Yeah,
pretty much, it's like an ego thing, in the sense of like, I made a movie, I want to work again, I need the movie to do well, I hope people like the movie. There's a lot of I.
yeah,
This is the first time that I don't, even though all those things are accurate, I've spent so much time foundationally working on other things. I feel like my future is very bright and very secure. And I'm very confident in this movie is just not about me.
Yeah.
I was on a call today with Saban and I said, look, if people like the movie or don't like the movie, that is what it is. This is about the messaging. This is about what this story is about. This is about being on the phone with Wayne Barrow and him talking about Black mothers being afraid to let their children go out into the streets, and how that story mirrors, Miss Wallace and her son, and the fact that what better name to be placed at the forefront of this conversation than Christopher Wallace, a iconic mega star, happens to also be a Black man lost at the hands of the police and
Yeah.
corruption in covering it up. I'm like, even though the stories are not exactly the same, there are themes that are crystal clear that we have to deal with as a society and as individuals. So as a result, um, that's what the movie is about. That's what I'm honored to be a part of. When I say I'm honored, that's what I mean. To stand side by side with Miss Wallace and Wayne and Elliot and all of these people, like it's just it was a huge undertaking that, I just gave every fiber of my being to fulfill. And that's what the movie's about for me. And that's what I stick with. And that's where I'm at with that. And it's just really genuine how I feel. It's like, I can't control how people aren't going to feel about any movie I make, but this one I hope, at least impacts people to question themselves and to question others and hold people accountable.
Yeah, well, it turned out great, and it's,
I
you
appreciate
should
that.
be proud of it. And it tells a story that people thought they knew that they didn't know. And, movie theaters have been closed for a year, March to March, and now it's
Crazy.
April, and it's one of the first movies in theaters, very limited. But, now as of April 9th, City Fly is available everywhere on VOD, anywhere people get their movies. So, now everyone can get a chance to see all your hard work.
Thank
So here's where it becomes like inside the actor studio, where we learn
you. Sure,
about
sure.
Brad Furman. So we're gonna go down memory lane with you. So, well, I guess in this case it's inside the director's studio today.
I'll take it.
So tell everyone where you're originally from.
Born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
Actually, Wynwood to be exact.
yeah. And so, what's your earliest memory of saying, I want to be a filmmaker when I grow up?
I didn't know that that was even a possibility growing up. I literally thought movies were like beamed into the theater. I had no idea the movie stars were real. I just remembered that movies were a great way for me to go to the theater and to lose myself in the stories and the characters. And it was just so much fun. I just wanted to go to the movies. I constantly wanted to go. There was no world for me that you make movies. I wasn't seeing that where I was from. I wasn't around any of that. It
Yeah.
didn't even feel realistic. I think I loved basketball. So my first dream was basketball. I loved music. I couldn't sing a note. I think I got kicked out of the choir in fifth grade. So being like Boys to Men or Jodeci was never going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, and I watched how hard my parents worked and the sacrifices they made. And, my mom's story in particular, just being from poverty, and, you know, she had me later in life a little bit, comparative to people at the time. And, was a school teacher originally, and then later became an attorney and one of the first female litigators in Philadelphia, and had a pretty prolific career. Not to say my dad didn't have a prolific career, but I saw how hard they worked. And I also lost my cousin at a really young age. He was like my big brother. He was my everything. I was 19 when he passed. And I think that was like foundationally a big shift for me, because I had lost about 10 people in my life at that time. And when you're that young and you've lost so many people, maybe even a few more actually, you just look at life and say, well, what do I want out of my life? Because one day I'm not going to be here.
Mm.
And that's when I started looking around at the world. And I guess I had enough experience to say, like, I would love to be a part of making movies. And that's really where it started for me. But even that, I went to Emory in my freshman year in Atlanta just because I wanted to play basketball at a good Division III school that had a good education.
Yeah.
The D1 schools that maybe I could have sat the bench on, I probably wouldn't have played. And on top of the fact, wouldn't have got as good of educations. And I wasn't, I don't know how comfortable, confident I was going to a big university at that age and stage of my life. I was a bit of a late bloomer. So Emory was like middle of the road. But I transferred pretty quickly. The segregation in the South and Atlanta was pretty severe, even when I went to Emory. And because I grew up in a pretty multicultural environment, and mostly with Blacks playing basketball in particular, and the cultural impact that those friendships had on me, I was really shocked when like the whites were with the whites and the blacks with the blacks and the Asian with the Asian. It was really segregated. So I jumped ship within a year, went to NYU. I got into film school.
Yeah.
I learned more on the streets of New York City and just growing up than I did in particular, but I'm very proud to have attended NYU. But I really, for the most part, I taught myself filmmaking, through just doing it. That's really how I learned ultimately.
Well, was applying to film school the first time you were like, I'm going to give this a try?
Yeah, because you don't really, especially being in a Jewish family, it's like if you're going to be a doctor, you go to medical school and you climb this ladder, and
Yeah.
like that's how your family tells you what to do. I think in being a director, filmmaker, it's like you either are or you are not. It's not
Right.
like, I ended up being, and you can be an assistant to a director, but you're still not a director, and you're not
Right.
working towards being a director. Other than learning and growing, you either are or you are not.
Right.
So I didn't know how to do it at all. And I think like it made sense in a Jewish family and like the structure of what I was explaining, like, well, go to film school because then you can learn something in film. Like it was at least
Right.
I could get like the puck past the goalie of my parents that like
Right.
I'm going to, film school and it's similar to like medical school. Like
Well, you know what? It's funny you say that because I've been saying since kindergarten that I wanted to direct movies and be Steven Spielberg. So I think my parents knew that it was so far gone at that point. Like there was no turning back for
oh,
me.
that's
So
good. Good for
so
you.
well in high school when I applied to college, my top two were Tisch at NYU and
Oh
Newhouse at
wow.
Syracuse, and I got into both and I couldn't decide. And I
Uh-huh.
ended up choosing Newhouse at Syracuse. The college counselor's like, it's the number one communication school. And they tell you, and it had more of like the campus feel, I think, like what you were
Yeah.
saying with Emory. So I was giving myself more of the college campus experience. Whereas, Tisch at NYU, which now looking back, I'm sure I would have loved it. But it again was like a kid moving to the city right out of high school. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. So I always think like, what I can't believe I didn't go to Tisch at NYU. But
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
glad
boys,
that
at
you did it.
19, 18 as a boy, you're probably typically young and immature too. I was. So I think that
Yeah.
those big decisions that you move toward what seems comfortable at that time.
Yeah, especially yeah, but it's interesting that you say Jewish family because it's true. You do try to follow a route that's going to get you there, like the proper way to get you there.
Yeah.
And so then you go to Tisch at NYU, and did you kind of feel like you were where you were supposed to be at that point?
Well, I had the difference for me was I spent that year at Emory and I knew that I knew I was never lasting 4 years there ever. And
Yeah,
I also knew that I was never going to achieve any goals that I had. And then I had moved to NYU. And then it was within that first semester or second that my cousin passed away. And
hmm.
just everything in my life just sort of transformed itself. And when you're faced to deal with real things, you grow up a lot. And I think that forced me to grow up a lot. And I was always the foundationally athletics and basketball really taught me a work ethic. It also taught me you get a lot of people pretty quickly telling you in life what you can and can't do.
Yeah,
So basketball also, because I was Jewish and I was, playing with mostly black kids, you're told pretty quickly like what you can't do, not actually by the black kids, but by the white kids who are either jealous or have opinions, or even your Jewish friends. Like I had one friend say like, he's like, I'm really proud because I'm like one of the best Jewish basketball players. And in my head, I was like, dude, what does that mean? Like,
right.
like I don't want to be the big fish in a small pond. I want to be the big fish in the big pond. So
Yeah,
I learned a work ethic that was dedicated toward proving people that told me I couldn't do something wrong.
yep,
Whether that was an insecurity I was overcoming, an ego thing, like I was uniquely driven to be like, okay, you think I can't watch? And so I just applied that to filmmaking. I recognized that there were real structural issues within the infrastructure of NYU and institutionally how kids were being taught filmmaking.
yeah,
So I started like aggressively looking for internships. I started aggressively trying to connect with people. I started trying in the summers. I started going on set. I got a full-time job when I was at NYU working for Nancy Glass at American Journal. And I was producing short segments, which, that was really the first foray into directing. I was producing 3 to 4 minute segments at 20 years of age. And like most of the producers there were 35, 40, 45 years old.
yeah,
So I just was able to gain a lot of confidence in the workplace and, figure my life out in that way. But I flew out, like through a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. I hooked up with Andrew Stevens. He was running Royal Oaks Entertainment, which was like a small B movie film company out here. And he was making a movie for the summer. And they say for the summer, like they shoot these things in like 18 days.
Yeah,
It was called Steel Sharks. It was like that year's big movie was Crimson Tide, or a few years prior. So it was the B movie version of Crimson Tide, and it was
right.
Gary Busey and Billy D. Warlock. Sorry, Gary Busey, Billy Warlock, and Billy D.
Yeah,
Um, and it was pretty crazy to me. Like I was the kid on set who did everything for everybody. I was like the PA. I was the drive the golf cart. But like I remember I don't know if you remember, but do you remember Billy D would do those commercials like it's Colt 45 time?
oh yeah, yes.
So this guy's like, Lando Calrissian in Star Wars. Like
Yeah,
I was like the coolest. I'm driving this guy in a golf cart. Like I mean, you could have just shot me dead then. I would have been like, I lived, man. I met Lando Calrissian. Like that
yeah,
was the coolest thing ever for me. But I picked him up at the end of the Santa Monica Pier, which was like the fake end of their boat. They're like literally shooting off the pier into the ocean as if it's like they're on like some like liner,
yeah.
which is so funny and so cheap and so amazing. And then as I pick him up and I drive him back to his trailer, and he looks at me, and I swear to you, because he was so famous for that line, it's Colt 45 time, and he would crack open the Colt 45, and he
Yeah.
looks at me and he goes, "It's marijuana time." And like I was like, 19-year-old kid, like I was totally and wowed and in all of this like unique character as a human being, but also Lando Calrissian still. So, I drove Gary Busey for a few weeks, and picked him up at his house every day, and Howard Stern like wrecked on him on the radio, and I had to listen to like Howard Stern saying like, how dumb is Gary Busey? What a moron. Why does the guy ride a motorcycle and not wear a helmet? Hasn't he had like 10 accidents? And like Gary's in my car going crazy, asking me to pull over, but he doesn't realize we're getting it on tape delay. And like
Oh my
I had
God.
all that, but I did 3 months of that working for Andrew, shooting that movie. And then I was like, I'm in. All I want to do is be on movies. Cause it just felt like I wasn't going to a job. Like it was,
Wait,
I dropped the film off at the end of the night. I would drop it off at Photochem at like 2, 3 in the morning. And then I would be up at 6 a.m. So I'd sleep 2, 3 hours a night. I just was having so much fun.
yeah.
Billy Warlock was on Baywatch.
Yep.
So
I
he was
remember.
like a big deal. So like, I got to talk to Billy Warlock. I was like, I just thought these things seemed cool to me.
They did. They were cool.
When you're 19 and impressionable and so as a result, that really solidified for me that filmmaking seemed fun, and I wanted to do something with my life that was fun. The secret they don't tell you is there's a ton of politics that come with filmmaking that I wasn't prepared for. I think also as you grow and mature, your goals and your dreams and your visions for them mature. Like if you had told me back then, like, Brad, you're going to be hired to direct, I know what you did last summer, I would have been like, oh my God, I'm in, amazing. But I've been offered a million horror films that have never said yes to one of them.
Right.
So, and I, by the way, it doesn't mean I wouldn't direct a horror film if it was the right one. I mean, I think, I know Fincher's Seven isn't horror per se, but it's in that space a little bit.
Right.
But your dreams change. And then the scarier part is if you actually achieve them, they don't tell you is like, they don't actually feel like what you expect them to feel like. So,
Right.
this is all the evolution of life and process, but that really solidified it for me. That time and space with Andrew Stevens that summer, I was like, I'm in. Where do I sign up?
And you went back to finish NYU after that?
Yeah, so I went back and I finished NYU, and I finished up my tenure working with Nancy Glass. And then I did the Nancy Glass pilot with her in New York City. And I guess, my first job out of college, not being in college and working at the same time, was ICM, because I had interned for Sis Corman, who was Scorsese's amazing casting director for many years. She
Awesome.
cast all of Scorsese's early films, and Sis was running Barbara Streisand's company at the time. And I was interning for free there. I was interning for free at David Brown's company. David Brown had found Spielberg with Zanuck. And Kit Golden was running the company at that time. And so I was doing all these free jobs, and I was figuring life out. And I circled back with Sis, and Sis like, well, it doesn't matter what you want to be in the business. You should go work in an agency, because if you go work in an agency, they're like the centrifuge of the whole business. And essentially you'll learn everything in and out about how the business works. And it was brilliant advice she gave me.
Yeah.
So she called Bodie Boatwright, who was a huge lead agent. And Bodie was on her office was next to Sue Liebman, and Sue, she was on the talent side and had worked for Warren Beatty for years and had tons of talent relationships. So she ended up a new agent over there and needed an assistant. I was her second, I think. And I came in and it was a year of pain for me. The 3 month learning curve was crazy. The
Mhm.
phones were ringing off the hook. You're just thrown into the wolves den and it's really stressful. And I wanted to be great. It turned out like I really was a great assistant. I was, no, I mean, honestly, man,
I believe it. I believe
I,
it.
I was an awesome assistant. It's just not what I wanted out of my life. Tony
Right.
Howard, who I still talk to, offered me to come out and be on her desk and then be a junior agent. I had gotten close with Jennifer Jason Leigh because I was handling all her tickets when she was on Cabaret. And then Elaine Goldsmith Thomas was asking me if I wanted to be Julia Roberts' assistant, which when she first asked me, I said no. I was like, I don't want to get some like person's laundry. And I was like, what am I going to do for her? And Elaine's such a great saleswoman. She was like, Brad, she's the biggest movie star in the world. Like, you're going to learn something. And then I was like, well, maybe if I could be on set, I could watch the director's work. That was where my head was.
No, it's smart.
So that's why I ended up taking the job for Julia, which the cool thing about Julia for me was she wasn't a micromanager. You know, when she needed something, she'd ask. But because I was so on top of the job, it gave me this inordinate amount of free time. And that's where I met Justin Marks, who I collaborated with early on in my career, who now has, written Jungle Book and he wrote Top Gun this year.
Right.
He's just had a really prolific career. He's had a TV show on Stars. Uh, Justin was just a kid, again, through a family friend who reached out to me. I was the guy working at Julia Roberts' office. And he was like, I want to write movies. And he was at Columbia. So I understood the whole being in college, soliciting, working thing. I thought he was really talented, young guy. And so we worked on, my first few shorts together and everything together. And he was really the backbone of the writing and everything we were doing. And we would make these things. And I always thought we would work together forever. Oddly, I ended up making The Take.
Yeah.
I had given, so just sidebar, but just so you can, I had given, I was playing basketball at UCLA when I had moved officially to Los Angeles, and I had won an award with one of my shorts. I came in like second place at the Hollywood Film Festival.
Yeah.
And I think the first place award was $1 million feature. And second place was something, I don't remember. But for some reason, they ended up offering me the $1 million feature. But as with everything in Hollywood, I spent 6 months working on that movie and it never came to fruition. I think the money wasn't real.
Uh,
Yeah, it was like one of those like really disheartening things. But the guy that I had met through it was a former NFL football player and wide receiver for the Jets and the Vikings named Matthew Hatchett. And Hatch and I got really close. We were playing basketball at UCLA. There was a guy there named Braxton Pope.
yep.
Braxton had produced one movie. And, I didn't know anything. So I was like, you're a producer? I'm a director. Like it was that and I was like, and Matthew has money he's willing to spend. We should all work together. And it was that simple. So the three of us dedicated ourselves. And I had given Braxton, and I don't know why he became the arbiter, but he did. I had given him like 2 or 3 scripts I wanted to make. And he was like, no. I don't know why I was like, I felt this responsibility to that we all had to agree versus this is what I want to make.
Right.
Probably should have done that. But The Take was a script that the Pate brothers had written that Braxton had brought to us. And I didn't really want to make it. I knew how to make it, but I wasn't like, oh, this is my, opus, or this is the film that speaks to who I am. What I didn't understand and why I think the story is important is the first shorts you make and the first film you make are defining of how everybody in Hollywood sees you and how they want you to be seen. So because I made this sort of heisty, noirish, dramatic thriller. As I said, it was a bit of a tweener. Everybody was like, this is who you are. And I was like, but wait, no, I want to make dramas and I want to make When Harry Met Sally. And I want to make all these, all these kind of movies that, you just end up on a path and you just follow it. And
But wait, so explain how long did you work with Julia Roberts, and then how did that, how much time between being her assistant and making The Take?
I worked with Julia. So I went from ICM to Julia Roberts. I worked with Julia for 3 years. They wanted me to stay, and I got to a point of really, it was a bit of boredom, a bit of frustration.
Did you end up on set with her? Did you get to be on set?
Well, that was another thing. So Julia didn't really travel much with her assistants because she, as I said, she was pretty self-sufficient, and her security would handle a lot of the assistant duties. So I got to deal with Soderbergh on Erin Brockovich, because the way Julia at the time was making movies, you get everything ready for her. So I was dealing with Soderbergh to get things ready for her, but I didn't get to work with like I met Brad Pitt and Gore Verbinski and the prep on the Mexican, but
Right.
I didn't actually go on the Mexican. I didn't actually go on Aaron Brockovich. And those things were immensely frustrating for me because the whole reason I took the job
Right.
was to watch all these people work and watch these directors work. So I sat down with Julie and I just said like, hey, I was like, I got to move on with my life because the whole reason I took the job outside of really loving you was that I like want to be on set. And if I can't do that, I was like, can you help me get a job as an assistant to a director? You're friends with like,
Every
all
director.
of these huge directors like Ron Howard and, you've just heard a few of them, Steven and Gore. But, you got to do these things on your own. You can't rely on anyone. The good thing was because it's not like she was like, yeah, you should go work for this one or that one. And nor did I think she should impose on her friends or, who knows, was it forced me again to look inside myself and say, well, if you either are or not a director, what do you have to do to be a director? And that's when I
Yeah.
just started. I had made a good chunk of change working for her. So I used that to pay for my first short film, Fast Forward, and that got in a bunch of festivals. And then soon thereafter, I relocated and, just a lot of things transpired. But I kept working and work. It's funny. So there's a young kid that I mentor a little bit because he used to work for me. And a friend of mine just yesterday sent me a music video and he's got about $5,000 to make it. So I thought of the young kid and I sent him the video and the kid texted me back and he was like, dude, there's no money. There's no this. It's like complaint, 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 complaint. And I just, in my head, I love him. I'm like, he just doesn't get it. I'm like, if you called me and said you had $500 to make anything, I was there. I just showed up anywhere to direct anything. I directed like a fresh pair of lingerie commercial where they had no money. I got a camera package to shoot this Kid Capri thing that we were like shooting for really cheap. And the guy showed up with all this random cash. And
Yeah.
then like I booked the camera package on a Friday and then we used it to shoot spec commercials on Saturday, Sunday. Like there was always some kind of hustle. Like we shot the rape PSA that I had come up with because I had seen a lot of young women at college deal with date rape. So I wanted to do something in the vein of like the Rachel Lee Cook anti-drugs campaign.
Hmm.
So I ended up linking up with Rachel Bilson and we did the rape campaign. But I used those cameras to shoot a Coke spec. Like I was just trying to shoot anything I could to learn. And the
Yeah.
beautiful thing is when I first came to Hollywood with my first short, this guy, Adam Kohlbrenner, signed me. And, he like did this amazing job and got me into like, honest to God, like 250 rooms in a year. I generally met everyone and everyone in Hollywood tells you like, I want to make a movie with you. I want to make a movie with you. Your short's brilliant. And then like I had this like long running joke that would be like, I'd be driving my car in LA and boom, I'd hit somebody and I'd rush out of the car and they'd be okay, thankfully. And I'd look down at them and be like, oh, hey, I met you.
Yeah.
Like the generals were so worthless. Like
Yeah.
it was cool to meet people. It's cool to hear that you're going to work, but like you get no work from it. And eventually that frustration built up inside of me. And then you look at like El Mariachi and Robert Rodriguez selling his body to science and all these crazy stories. That's what inspired me to go to Matthew Hatchett and be like, dude, here's how we're going to do this. Just put 500,000 in escrow. We're going to make an offer to John Leguizamo for 300,000. We're going to lie to William Morris and tell him the movie's fully financed because the money's escrowed. And then once we get John, we're going to wrap the rest of the cast around. We'll get other actors, and then we'll go out and get the rest of the movie financed. And that's exactly the plan, and it
Wow.
exactly worked. And that's how I got my first movie made. And
Wow.
and I did that solely because I started realizing that if I waited on the business or waited on other people, I was dead. I was never going to have a career because I wasn't a director. And then also I got my first job ever, my first paid job at 25. I directed a music video for Universal Records for the Marie sisters. And it was like a $75,000 budget. Typically as a director, they had what was called a glam squad for 25 grand. So
Yeah.
from my, what I've been told, it was supposed to be 50, but there was the 25 plus. So my fee is 10%. So I'm supposed to get a $5,000 check. I remember my check comes in the mail. I'm living on my friend's couch at Burton Way. I open it up and it's $500.
Mm.
And I remember calling my pops up and he was like, it's funny because he's not this cutthroat, but he was like, so how are you going to do this? How are you going to make a living? He was so like matter of fact. And I remember looking in the mirror, like, he's right. Like, I can't make a living like this. So, all of these things collectively amounted to me just realizing that nobody's going to do jack shit for me and I have to go out and do it myself. And that's
Yeah.
just the truth. And that's what I did over and over and over again. I mean, even after Runner was like the equivalent of getting hit by like a 150-mile-per-hour train, and run over, and basically being told like, hey, you made the Lincoln Lawyer, you have a career, we let you in the King's Castle. But I'm sorry, we just decided notification came, you have to be taken out.
Wow.
and I thought my career was dead. So I linked up with Miriam Siegel and worked with my agent at the time, Stuart Manishill, and we got Infiltrator off the ground and shot an 80s Florida movie. I mean, just think about it. Like originally the bill of goods I was sold on the Infiltrator was like, $80 million movie, huge cash, travel around the world. And then all of a sudden you find out it's like, it's still a ton of money, 20 some $million, below the line's probably like 10. And, but you can shoot it in London in the dead of winter, current day, but it's an 80s Florida movie.
Right.
And all I kept thinking was like, oh my God.
How did this happen?
Yeah. But then, I shot 85% of that movie in the dead of winter in London. And I don't think it feels like it. And most people who I tell that to are really shocked, which is the best compliment on that movie you can get. So,
yeah.
Wow. I guess I've told you a lot, but I think all these things for me, I feel like I've made a lot of movies. I'm really honored to have had those opportunities, but they're all weird compromises for me. And I think now the line in the sand is like, I'm just unwilling to compromise again in the future of my filmmaking. Like, I'm not going to sit here and make excuses for the past. I'm so proud that people have loved those movies. I'm so proud they've moved the needle for people. I'm so proud that there's fans and people, whether it's one or thousands or millions, but I just know I've grown into figuring out who I am. It's taken a long time. And I just think compromising is just not going to get me where I want to go.
So. Right. Well, I like to go through the movies if you don't mind. If we
go right ahead
a little bit, just to give people backstory so they understand kind of the journey. So that first movie, The Take, your directorial debut. So you ended up giving John Leguizamo most of the budget to lock him in, and then used whatever was left to make the movie. That's how you did it.
In a nutshell. Yep. And then Tyrese took a big chunk of change, even though he was my boy. I had to have the call where it was like, I'm going to pay you a lot of money. Which, again, he came for a week.
Yeah. But so the cast, John Leguizamo, Tyrese Gibson, Rosie Perez plays John Leguizamo's wife, Bobby Cannavale. If people haven't seen the movie, John Leguizamo is an armored truck driver, and he gets abducted and shot by Tyrese's character, and he loses his memory, and he can't figure out who did it, and he needs Bobby Cannavale, who's the FBI agent who's supposed to help him, and Rosie's his wife, and you go on that journey with him. When you're making your first movie, what were the expectations? Were you like, I just have to get this done, I just need people to see this? And you were like, I just need my first movie made? Was it like everything you dreamed it would be like directing a movie, or what was that like, that first one?
Well, the good news was, because I had spent those first few years at 25, I think I started shooting that movie when I was like 28, 29.
Yeah.
And I had my ass handed to me for a few years, as I explained, of like everybody telling me what they thought I wanted to hear, but not doing anything, and investing in opportunities that were belly up, or investing in that film festival award that wasn't real money, and countless time that went down a drain. But because, as I had also explained, I had directed so many things, from like 30-second things to 10-minute things to a doc feature, I was very prepared. Yeah. So it wasn't a situation where things were making a $500,000 movie is hard enough. Making a $500,000 movie with some of the people I made the movie with as well made it even harder. Yeah. I was really prepared for battle. I mean, The Take, to this day, I think will go down for me, and I've not figured out what to do with it. Will go down as one, like, if I could have just had a full behind the scenes on it, because like I climbed a 30-foot fence and stole the keys to the armored car, and I busted through the gate. And then we took my dad's car, and my this intern kid who came and worked, who was my assistant. My cinematographer was out the sunroof of my dad's car shooting while I was driving the armored car that I'd stolen. And it was because they told me that all the armored car stuff had been cut from the movie. Because they said you couldn't light it. I broke every rule. You couldn't drive it at night for this reason. There wasn't permits. I was like, well, I don't have a movie without that. So I stole the truck, they said, oh, the whole thing, and then you're going to storm this. It was like the downtown, LA produce market.
Yeah.
I literally drew up a map, and we had 3 cars, and I put the actors in the cars, and we stormed the produce market from all sides with the cameramen. I mean, it was the story. And then the police showed up, and everybody got maced. And it's like, Leguizamo was in his trailer, and he got pulled away, and they didn't know he was in the trailer. We shot on the railroad. I mean, I had Cannavale driving like it was like French Connection, and we were filming it and attached a camera to, like, we did so much crazy stuff to make that movie. But
Wow.
I don't advocate for people to do some of it, because some of it was a bit dangerous, but we're lucky in that sense. But
you got it done.
yeah, that's all I remembered was like, it was like sink or swim. I was like, I'm never going to work again unless I get it on film. And the golden rule about movie making is none of the stuff that's going on around you matters. You just have to get it on film.
Right.
Like that's the golden rule. Like, you have to get it on film. So for me, that was my mindset. Just get it on film. And then you get in the edit room, and you hope you have what you need, and you figure it out. But I had also, on one of my shorts, I undercovered a bunch of scenes. So I was in the edit room, and they weren't cutting the way I really wanted them to. And I think it hurt the film. So it was like, boom, lesson learned. So I'm on the take. I never undercovered any scenes.
Right.
You just don't, you make a mistake, you learn, you grow, you get up, you keep going. And I just kept applying those things. So the take was wild. It's the ultimate education on how to make a movie, and how to make an indie film. I think, honest to God, I'm not even joking, because I studied El Mariachi and the director's commentary. It's way better than that. I'm just not, in the world. If I ever get to the success that I would like to get at, I would love to sit with Sony and figure out how to use it as a teaching tool. It's the perfect education tool on the planet.
That would be so cool.
Yeah, it's an amazing education. It should be shown at every film school. No, I'm not. It has nothing to do with my ego. It's just,
I know.
We made the movie. I mean, when we went into production, we had 200,000. And John's movie, I convinced John to hold and defer his money till later, which almost got me dead, because by the time the movie was over and they had run out of money, I didn't have the money to pay him. So like, it was just all so crazy. So it's just a great teaching tool on that. And I'm very proud of the movie for that reason.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to talk to you about it. And also,
I appreciate it.
But also, it's a great thing that you made the take, because that became your calling card to get your next movie. I mean, I've heard that Lakeshore, that was making The Lincoln Lawyer, the guys who run Lakeshore, Tom and Gary, they watched the take and wanted you to direct Lincoln Lawyer, and that Matthew McConaughey personally advocated for you. Like, supposedly they told him all these directors that wanted to do Lincoln Lawyer, and he turned them all down. And then he went back to them and said, I've got this guy, Brad FURMAN, watch his movie, The Take. So it really paid off. I mean, making The Take got you that next movie.
1,000%. Kevin Cornish, who, I haven't talked to in a while, is a great guy. He was working for, oh man, what is that company? But there was a really cool movie they were involved in that Matthew had been flirting with. And somehow, I have no idea, Kevin got me a meeting with McConaughey, and I went down to his Venice office. And I remember, like, again, it's all these, like, how do you channel your frustrations in life? I had this piece of paper that it's like very me. I'm like running to meet McConaughey, and it's like, I'm the guy, like, if I show up 2 hours, people are like perpetually on time and they show up early. I'm the opposite. Because if I show up early for the meeting, I'm going to sit there for 30 minutes thinking of everything, and I'll panic. Like, I won't, like, I'm better if I just like go in, like, just send me in and I'm better. Like, I'm not good with time in that way. And I was running late, very me, to the meeting with Matthew. Thankfully, I lived in Venice. I hit print. I printed out his IMDb page. I had like glanced at it for a split second, walked in like really quick, sat down with them. And I don't know where I got the cojones, but I was like, all right, man. And I pulled it out of my back pocket. I held up his IMDb resume, and I was like, 13 conversation about one thing, you're incredible. Dazed and Confused, you're incredible. I'm blanking on the legal thriller. I was like, you're incredible. Time to Kill, you're incredible. I was like, the rest of these movies, I'm not saying you're bad. I get you how to make a lot of money. They're meaningless to me. I was like, in my mind, you should be a young Paul Newman. And Matthew is like super charismatic. He threw his hands up in the air and he's like, come with me, come with me. And he dragged me and he ran me into the back of his office, like behind where we were. And he had this huge, beautiful movie poster signed by Paul to him. and we just really connected. And he ended up not choosing to make the movie I was there to talk about. And as a result of that, I was like on that list, and he had seen the take prior to the meeting.
Yeah.
And you are correct. Tommy Lee Jones was the original director on Lincoln Lawyer. Tommy and Tom Rosenberg had a falling out. It was an open directing assignment, and my agent Stuart Manishield did a brilliant job through Lucchese of like putting me up for it. And separate to that, Matthew had his list, and it all just sort of like weirdly coincided. And next thing
Perfect.
you know, I was in 3 weeks of interviews, 3 weeks to get the Lincoln Lawyer job.
Wow.
It was Tom is, he's a wonderful and inspiring human being, but it was a grueling, intimidating process. I was, raised in the legal community. My grandfather was an attorney. My father became an attorney. My mother later in life became an attorney. I knew how to make that movie in, out, up, and down. And I also knew that I think what was tricky about that movie is like the legal thriller genre had gotten a bit boring. So I was like, the way to flip it is through, the role of Earl, the driver, because Earl was like the ear to the streets. And that's how we can bring in all the 90s hip hop. And we can bring the ear of the streets, into the movie and the education of Mickey Holler. And also like par and parcel, this is why I think it's funny. They're making the Netflix show now. They were doing CBS. I couldn't even get an interview to direct the pilot. Yeah, it's funny because I think either they're afraid that like they don't want me to do the same thing, or but there's something in the DNA, and I'm giving them a trade secret. One of the reasons that I knew how to make the Lincoln Lawyer outside of my point of view was Mickey's a character that lives in the gray. He's not someone that's black and white. So what he does is he bends the rules just enough where he doesn't break them and he slips through. And if you look at that, that's exactly how I made the take. And it's exactly how I made everything. I'm always just bending the rules just enough and slipping by. And so like, that's who Mickey Holler is. So it was like, I understood it in a way that was so particular to me.
Yeah.
And so, it was just one of those things. And I don't even, by the way, business is business. And it's like, I understand, like I am connected to the old school original Lincoln Lawyer, and they're trying to do this whole new, none of that's even personal. There's no ego, but like part of me was like, I want to reinvent the wheel. I want to do something different, but and Connolly called me and he was so funny. He was like, they're using your movie and they're referencing every frame. you have to come do the pilot. And I was like, well, tell them to call me if they want to call me. But these are the ebbs and flows of life in Hollywood. And I don't, they are what they are. I don't think it.
Well, Lincoln Lawyer, you mentioned Connolly. It's based on a book by Michael Connolly about a lawyer who works out of his Lincoln town car instead of an office. I've seen interviews with him where it's somebody he met at a baseball game told him that he was a lawyer who worked out of his car, and he said by the end of the baseball game he knew what the book was going to be. I mean, that was an amazing movie for you to have as your second movie. The cast: Matthew McConaughey as Mickey, Marissa Tomei as his ex-wife Maggie, Ryan Phillippe, Josh Lucas, John Leguizamo again. He came back to work with you again. Michael Pena, Margarita Leviva, Francis Fisher, Bryan Cranston, who you would work with again, William H. Macy. I mean, that is a dream cast. What was that like, putting that cast together? I mean, what an amazing project.
I feel like I want to always be an actor's director, and Tom and Gary were just wonderful to make the movie with, and they were really supportive of that type of cast. And Lakeshore had built a reputation of elegance in the space of making these kind of movies. So since they were held in high regard and very elegant as far as a shop and how they made movies, it's something I didn't fully understand or appreciate at that age and time. Having do it over, I would have just stayed at Lakeshore and made movies. I made a crucial mistake and not understanding or really appreciate the system that Tom had built. It was just really challenging and really hard for a lot of reasons. And as a result, I sort of thought I had my sights set on a lot of other things. But you live and you learn. But their support was really, and the way that Hollywood perceived their company and the type of movie they were making, and then bringing on Deb Aquila, this deeply respected casting director.
Right.
It's a windfall of an effect. It's you have Matthew, and then you have John, and then because you have John, you get to get Marissa, and then because you have Marissa, you get to get Bill, and and then you get to Pena, and then you get to Cranston because he's hot off Breaking Bad, and Francis Fisher, and
So
Margarita
cool.
I had seen in was it Adventureland?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
But she came in an audition, and I was like, this girl's amazing,
Yeah,
and became a friend, and I'm still such a fan of Margarita. She's just incredible. So
yeah.
we were really blessed that I think if you build it as far as the material, the actors will come.
Yeah, I mean, I also need to mention something. The Lincoln Lawyer is responsible for what we now know as the McConaissance. And you, as the director, so you also get credit for the McConaissance. For people who don't know, the McConaissance is the resurgence of Matthew McConaughey's career, which started in 2011 with your movie. We first came to know him, like you said, Dazed and Confused. He really took off in 1996 with The Time to Kill. Then he had a string up from like 97 to 2003, Contact, Amistad, The Wedding Planner, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Then I think it was like 2005, Sahara underperformed, or it wasn't what people were expecting. And everything changed course. He never found his footing again until The Lincoln Lawyer. And then after The Lincoln Lawyer, Mud, Magic Mike, Wolf of Wall Street, and of course won the Oscar for Best Actor for Dallas Buyers Club. The same year was nominated for an Emmy for True Detective, and there's the McConaissance ever since. But how does that feel that the Lincoln Lawyer is credited with the resurgence of his career?
I really love Matthew. The movie he had done last prior to The Lincoln Lawyer was Surfer Dude,
Right.
and I felt really honored, and I thought it was super cool to get to work with Matthew and, just focus on making the best movie we could. So the fact that I think it gave him everything in life is not everything, but a lot of life is confidence.
Yeah.
I think what Lincoln Lawyer Matthew got his mojo back,
Yeah.
got his confidence back. And I think as a result, he was able to roll that into everything else that he achieved. But I'm a big believer, once a star, always a star. It's not like, it's sort of cool to hear about the McConaissance and all these different things, but the truth is Matthew was a star way before I ever met him, any of those things. So, when Travolta comes back in, Tarantino's, film, everybody's like so surprised, but like Tarantino knew he was a star when he cast him. It's not like Pulp Fiction. This is not an anomaly. So
Right.
it's
I
just,
agree with
again,
that.
it's how the business frames and impacts everything versus like, once a star, always a star.
Yeah, I agree. Always a star, but sometimes it takes a role like Pulp Fiction for Travolta to bring you back
Yeah, for sure.
into the fold. But the Lincoln Lawyer just had its 10th anniversary in March, so it was
Yeah, crazy.
crazy spotlighted on iTunes for the 10th anniversary. It was like back in the top sellers list. And then also in honor of the 10th anniversary, Rotten Tomatoes wrote an article a couple weeks ago. I don't know if you saw it, but it said 5 reasons why Lincoln Lawyer was the perfect film for the McConaissance. And it was one, McConaughey is an excellent movie lawyer. Two, the film gave him his edge back and allowed him to reset. Three, McConaughey soars in R-rated films. Four, this one's unusual. He's best at playing characters whose names begin with M.
Okay.
And five, the film boasts a deep bench of supporting characters. So I think that's true. That is such an ensemble of such good supporting characters and supporting actors that surrounded him that everybody kind of elevated each other. And I think that's such a great cast that you put together for that. And I think McConaughey actually later admitted that he came up with McConaissance. He told one reporter that
Oh, is
another
that
reporter,
true?
yeah, he was promoting Mud, I think at Sundance. And so he was talking to a reporter and he's like, another reporter this morning said I'm having a McConaissance, but that didn't really happen. He wanted to coin it himself, but he
Oh,
didn't
that's
want to
funny.
take credit. Yeah.
Uh,
Um, so how about the rest of that cast? I mean, Ryan Phillippe is a friend of mine. He's on my list of people I have that I want to work with. I've told him that he was in one of my favorite movies ever, Cruel Intentions, and I felt like Lincoln Lawyer for him was a return to form because he was kind of like Sebastian in Cruel Intentions again. Instead of a spoiled New York City kid, you made him a spoiled Beverly Hills kid
yeah,
and
yeah.
more mature and dealing with, he's being accused by Margarita's character of something and what was that like getting Ryan Phillippe and getting Marissa Tomei, who I've always loved since My Cousin Vinny, and before that, A Different World, where she was Denise Huxtable's college roommate. What was that like putting
I
together
mean,
this
these
cast?
things all become dream come trues, but
Yeah,
you have to approach these actors in a very human way, in a very honest way, and I always
right.
try to do that. And just as yourself, I was a huge fan of Marissa, huge fan of Ryan, and uh, Marissa, we were able to secure And I sat down with a meeting with her at the chateau, and she grilled me with questions because her attention to detail is so wonderfully incredible. So we
Yeah.
sat for about 2.5 hours, and she just had every question about the role and the movie and the this and the that. And it was just great. And Marissa had become a friend and has become a friend after that. And she's just so inspiring. I think to young actors, but especially young female actors, like what a career has and had and
Amazing.
continues to have, and you can learn so much from her. And she's just an amazing human being, and I'm so honored and blessed that she did that, and I want to work with her again. Ryan was interesting because we were auditioning for the Louis Roulet role forever. It was a
Really?
little bit of a David Mack type scenario, and then I heard that Ryan wanted the role. And so we took a general together and we sat and we talked. And I said, hey, man, like, I don't mean to be rude or weird, but we've been down such a long rabbit hole in this. I need you to audition. And he was like, I'm down. He's like, the whole reason I wanted to meet you was I just wanted to hear about the role, and I'm down to audition. And
Cool.
yeah, like super cool, and really caught me off guard. And he won the role and earned it. And it wasn't just simply from the prior work he had done. He was brilliant, and we cast him, and it really worked. And I'm proud to say Ryan's a friend as well. He's just a great human being.
Yeah, he's the best. And he's so good in your movie. And then, of course, Bryan Cranston, that was the first time you worked together. Obviously, had a good working relationship because you would go on to make The Infiltrator together. And then, which we'll talk about. But I remember seeing Lincoln Lawyer at the Grove. I did a double feature, Lincoln Lawyer and Limitless came
Oh
out
wow, yeah, I
around the
remember.
same time. Yeah,
Yeah.
and but I just remember it was such a fun movie to watch, Lincoln Lawyer on the big screen, the music again that you infuse, that I feel like it would only have that hip hop music vibe if you directed it. Had it gone to these other directors, I don't know if they would have infused that. So I think that's your unique style. But how did it feel when the movie was so well received, by critics and also audiences, because it did really well?
Um, it's an overwhelming feeling. It's also a weird feeling, overwhelming in a good way, because obviously you make a movie and you want people to like and love it, and the movie really did catch fire. It's also a weird feeling because I like being the underdog. So it's super cool to like be this film that I had a lot of people. So after the take, I had passed on a lot of movies.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time I engaged in the open directing sign of Lincoln Lawyer, I had a lot of people be like, oh, that movie's a dog. You can't make a legal thriller. Matthew's career's dead. I've heard all the baloney.
Wow.
And I just blocked out the noise and said, I'm making this movie. I want to make it. I believe in Matthew. I believe in the movie. In success, it sort of validates what you believe and what you feel. What's interesting is there's all these people in Hollywood that like formerly wouldn't talk to you, or formerly wouldn't take a meeting with you, or acted like you didn't exist, that all of a sudden are your friends. So it's a weird thing. And you all of a sudden start looking around going like, this is a little bit of a weird place at times.
Yeah.
I matured past that as well, because I've gotten to a place in my life where I just make it about the work. I stick to the grindstone, and I just keep doing the work, and you figure out pretty quickly who you can and can't trust. And
Right.
I don't think it's necessarily particular to Hollywood. Business is business, and business can be really complicated and tricky. And you got to just, like stay focused and not let the noise distract you. So whether your movie succeeds or fails, I think you got to keep moving forward. And it took me some time to realize that. Unfortunately for me, I knew in the success of Lincoln Lawyer that, it was like, what would Michael Jordan do? He would go out to the gym and he'd work harder. I wouldn't just rely on my laurels and be like, oh, I'm a success.
Right.
And that's what I did do. But unfortunately, I think the misstep for me was I knew in my heart Runner really, even though it's a movie that I actually get a lot of love for and help my international value, it just was a movie at the time and place wasn't necessarily the right next step for me. There were some things I had written that probably would have been, a better move for me, knowing what I knew then and now, but that's just life.
Right. Yeah. Before we move on to Lincoln Lawyer, though, I just want to say the author of the Lincoln Lawyer book, Michael Connolly, there's a great quote from him about your movie. He says, I saw an unfinished cut and I could not be happier. I thought it was very loyal to the story and the character of Mickey Haller. Matthew McConaughey nails him. Those who love the book will love the movie. Those who don't know the book will love it just the same. The casting and acting is really superb. Like I said, I could not be happier. Very excited and can't wait to see what fans of the book think, which I thought was awesome, because usually people complain like the book was better. But you had the author of the book say the movie's good whether you like the book or not, which I thought was a really cool sentiment. We don't often hear from the author after the movie comes out, you know?
Yeah, it's really rare to be so blessed. I know Michael worked on blood work with Killian Eastwood and had a tough experience on
Oh,
that film.
wow.
So the fact that he was so happy with this meant a lot to me, and I still keep a close relationship with him today.
Yeah, nice. Well, so then the next movie, like you said, 2013, Runner Runner, written by Koppelman and Levine, whose breakout movie was Rounders. Uh, it's about a Princeton grad student played by Justin Timberlake who has to go to Costa Rica to confront this online gambling tycoon who's played by Ben Affleck. And, then he becomes, kind of seduced by the world. And then the FBI, the FBI agent played by Anthony Mackie, he wants Richie to help them bring Ivan Block to justice, and the crime thriller ensues. That cast Ben Affleck and Justin Timberlake, Gemma Arterton, who's awesome, Anthony
Yeah,
Mackie, Ben Schwartz, John Hurd played Richie's dad. I got to work with John Hurd on my short film Graffiti. Yeah, and he passed away actually 2 weeks before we premiered at Holly Shorts. But he was supposed to come to the premiere. He had gotten to see it, and he told his manager it was one of his favorite things he did that year, which was so nice
well, that's
to
cool.
hear. Yeah, I was so glad he got to see it. But yeah, I mean, the dad from Home Alone, the boss from Big. I mean,
Yeah, Heard's amazing. He always,
amazing.
yeah. I
So
love
talk
him
about
in the film Gladiator with James Marshall and Cuba Gooding Jr.
right. Yeah, and he was Emmy nominated for Sopranos. He was awesome,
Okay,
John
Paul.
Hurt. Yeah, but what was that like working with Ben Affleck and those guys? Because if you're like me, I grew up wanting to make a Good Will Hunting type movie.
Yeah, sure.
When those guys won the Oscar for best screenplay, I was so happy for them. Like, what was that like?
I think I learned the best part about Runner Runner was I learned so much.
Yeah,
But politically, the movie was really, really challenging for me. I think it was one of those things where I was making one movie. I don't know if the studio necessarily knew what movie they were wanting to make.
right.
And then there was a whole bunch of other people. And then Koppelman and Levine, I think, making another movie. I think this was in some way a follow up. And that's not a negative for them. I think it was a follow up to wanting to make Rounders, maybe like a version of a sequel. And that's just, to me, this movie was like Last King of Scotland in the world of City of God. But I
Mm,
would not support it to make that movie. And it was just tricky. I mean, Ben's a brilliant, brilliant guy and was very affable to work with. Justin's all heart and lays it all out there and kills himself. But I just had a really, you hear these stories about filmmakers that have a first tough studio experience. And unfortunately for me, it was just riddled with a ton of problems.
mm,
Day one, day one, three, it was just riddled with problems. And I think it boils down to this. There's a version because Justin, as a wonderful talented musician and a pop star,
yeah,
perceived by the world as a particular way, whether, at times like bubblegum or pop. That's where that term in theory comes from.
yep,
Cotton candy. Affleck had done some stuff that was also a little bit in that vein, and he was a big star. So my thing, and it's very similar to what we're talking about in a different way with City of Lies,
yeah,
my thing with that was like, you have to take these guys and you've got to drop them in a world and you have to flatten out the tone and you've got to make this gritty, hard hitting movie with them
yeah,
and erase the veneer of all these other things. But, I was, I had, when originally came out to the movie, it was going to be my crew, my this, my that. By the time the movie was rolling into production, they had hired Maurer Fury, who, had won an Academy Award for Avatar, and he's a really nice guy, but that didn't mean he was the right cinematographer for the movie. I
right,
mean, in a fun way, but because it's all learning stuff. If you're on set on a 100-degree hot sunny day and you're lighting outside exteriors in Puerto Rico, I know that what that's going to do to the film is it's going to look like a Dave Meyer music video. It's going
mm,
to be super poppy, super glossy. That's what the Jennifer Lopez videos that Dave directed back in the day looked like. That was the antithesis of the feel that I was going for, because I think subconsciously the audience's mind interprets things that they don't fully realize. That's
yeah,
subconscious. So if you have these actors who might be considered a little bit pop, whether they are or not, in this bubblegummy cotton candy type feeling of a movie, then it loses its authenticity. And I think we were just off base from day one.
wow,
Truthfully, Koppelman and Levine probably really should have been the directors of that movie and made their version of the movie. I was just, I guess, quote unquote, hot off Lincoln Lawyer, and
Yeah.
I was the go guy for international, and it all worked out. But it was just a great learning lesson for me. And I don't know. There's probably an edit of that movie, maybe with a color time. I don't know. I don't know. I let it go a long time ago. But it's crazy. I get a ton of love for it. So movies are made for entertainment and for fun. And when people are complimentary about it and really love it and respond to it, I'm very appreciative and thankful that they saw it. It's just one of these things where back to Al Ruddy says, "Oh, they only remember your winners, kids." And it was a movie that I just took a real big hit on personally and professionally. And I have fought to come back from it, but there were some really great learning experiences, and that's positively what I took from it. And I have the utmost respect for everyone involved, from Jennifer Davison now at Appian Way, produced the movie, and Koppelman and Levine have gone on to great success with their TV show, and Ben as a director and filmmaker and actor, and Justin now with his new movie coming out, and it seems like everybody associated with is thriving and doing really well. So you have winners and you have losers, and for me this was on the other side.
Yeah, so that's interesting. At least you can look at it as a learning experience. But it's an entertaining movie. I think people do like the film. It does have its fans.
I had really high hopes for it. I felt we were doing something in my head. The movie I was making, I was really ahead of the curve with the EDM music.
Yeah.
That's why I had Deadmau5 in there. I was doing some really unique stuff with him and with Strobe. I was doing this whole thing, entering a world that we hadn't seen, like Last King of Scotland. But the movie that got made it's just not that at all. And again, it was tough. It was tough at the time. But if you don't take those experiences and learn from them, I don't know how you grow. I don't know how you fight again and not make the same mistakes.
Right.
And I've just tried to use it as a very positive learning experience.
Yeah, it seemed like a cool movie to work on, but there's always the true story behind
There's a lot positive, but a lot negative too.
Yeah. Before I get to the last movie on your filmography, I just want to mention in 2015, after Runner Runner, you directed a Justin Bieber music video for his song "What Do You Mean." I don't think people know that. And you put John Leguizamo in it, who was in, Lincoln Lawyer and The Take. And there's a whole kidnapping thing that kind of is a throwback to The Take, too. It's like a mini movie, that video. What was that like, directing a Justin Bieber video?
I always loved music videos. I grew up a product of the MTV generation. So for me, making videos was like paramount. It's something that I really wanted to do and did a little bit early in my career. But the music business really got crushed by Napster and everything that was going on. So it was a time and place where music videos were not, they were falling apart with the business. So, the inevitable and eventual goal was to be a feature filmmaker. So to get to go back and work with Justin, who was just such a great human being and really inspiring. And, I had a wonderful experience. Allison and Scooter were just amazing as well. Justin's management team, and I got a really positive experience and a lot of fun. And I wanted to support Justin as his attempt in a great way as an actor. So I put John opposite him to
that was cool.
Sort of do that and give it some validity in that regard. But we had a great time. We talked about recently doing it again, and schedules and timing and some other things didn't line up. But I'm sure we'll work together when the time's right. But it was a ton of fun for me to get into the music space and make a little movie. And it's like a 90s throwback video from like the era of, Aerosmith videos and the Guns N' Roses videos that were stories. And I wanted to move into that space with Justin. So it was fun.
Yeah, those were the best. And I love that you direct that video, because back then I was also directing What Do You Mean videos, but they starred my nieces. I actually have videos on my phone from 2016 of them doing videos to What Do You Mean, Baby, all the Justin Bieber songs.
He's a big star, man. And he's just a great human being. He really.
Yeah, and he's having his own comeback right now, too, with his new album. So last but not least, in 2016, you directed an awesome movie called The Infiltrator. Like City of Lies, it's a true story. It's based on the book by Richard Mazer. It's his autobiography. The full title of his book, The Infiltrator, My Secret Life Inside the Dirty Banks Behind Pablo Escobar's Medellin Cartel. So that tells you what it's about. Basically, Robert Mazer was a U.S. custom special agent, and then in the '80s he went undercover as a corrupt businessman to help bust Pablo Escobar's money laundering organization. So it's a fascinating story, and the script was written by Ellen Brown Furman, who also happens to be your mother, which I
Yes.
think is so cool. And you directed it. Tell me how you ended up directing it, how your mom wrote the screenplay, because I love that it's mother son collaboration.
My mom has always been a tremendous uh, point of inspiration for me. She was writing and fall. Well, she's very she won international awards in literary writing.
Right,
It's her, it was like teacher, female litigator, writer. What really changed was I was writing a ton in my early 20s, and I was sharing some of it with my mom and learning a lot from my mom. And I think she picked screenwriting is it's not really the highest form of writing compared to real literary writing. So it's someone who's a literary writing, it may come fairly easier to them than others. And I
mm,
think screenwriting came pretty easy in theory in a lot of ways to my mom. So we were really struggling to find a writer who could balance the understanding of the money laundering, the intellectual side of it, the
right,
political corruption of what was going on, the movement of like corporate bureaucracy within the infrastructure of government. There's a lot of moving pieces. And my mom was probably the best and most sophisticated writer that we had an opportunity to get a crack at. And actually, it came Don Sikorsky, who was my friend who found the book, and I said I had a
right,
long history. He was the investigative journalist, also gave me the Labyrinth book.
yeah,
He was like, I think your mom's the right writer. I never thought in 100 years we could get my mom the job. But I in all due credit to Miriam's being open-minded and quite a leader in that sense. She was game for having my mom write it, and my mom came and pitched, and the pitch wasn't as great as we would have liked it to be. But Miriam subsequently went back and read some of my mom's material and felt confident she can make it work, and I did too. So it was we learned a lot. I'd like us to make a movie together again because it was a tough movie for a lot of reasons. Like I explained, shooting it in Florida in the 80s,
right, right.
Florida 80s, and with the dead of winter under, limited budget constraints. Just we got rushed in development for certain reasons, just a lot of things that were challenging that, you want to take from and learn and evolve into. But I got to connect with this wonderful editor, David Rosenblum. And, he's just so inspiring. And, I that was just a great experience with him. So it was a great learning experience, and it was
Yeah,
it was a ton of fun.
and an amazing cast. So I do want to mention the cast. Bryan Cranston as Robert Mazer, who you worked with on Lincoln Lawyer. John Leguizamo, who you worked with on The Take and Lincoln Lawyer. Diane Kruger, Amy Ryan, Benjamin Bratt, Olympia Dukakis, who won an Oscar for Moonstruck. Jason Isaacs, who I love. He's one of the nicest guys.
Yeah, Jason's just awesome.
Yeah,
He's
he's actually close family friends with my friend Jake Avnett's family. So I've spent
oh
like
wow.
Rosh Hashanahs and Yom
Oh
Kippurs with
wow.
Jason Isaacs. Yeah, and he like stays with us at the Sundance at their house in Park City. But yeah, you got to film Infiltrator. You said London, Paris, and Florida, but the dead of winter obviously made that difficult
Yeah,
for
it was
you.
just a period piece, and
Yeah,
in London, it's not like if we were shooting it in Florida, the whole thing it would have been easy. But
yeah,
then
yeah,
we would have just worked on the period. But it just had some real unique challenges, and you want to focus on character and story, and
yeah,
like that was a movie. I think coming off of Runner and some of the tough experiences, I wanted to lean into who could I trust, who could I work closely with.
yeah,
So having a Benjamin Bratt who was a lifelong friend, having a Yul Vasquez come back who was a lifelong friend,
yeah,
having Leguizamo, Cranston. I had a terrific experience on Lincoln Lawyer. I think we created this family, and my mom,
yeah,
actual family. We
actually,
created a very familial environment to make the movie, and I was really proud. And it was also the birth of a new relationship for me with Jess First, who produced the movie with us, and
mhm.
it was just really positive. And it was hard, and there were real challenges, but it was a good step forward.
Yeah. Well, when you see the finished product, you wouldn't realize all those challenges, which is, I
That's
guess,
all that matters, right?
exactly, movie magic. Do you think that
Yeah.
doing a true story like The Infiltrator led to you wanting to do another true story with City of Lies? Did you like being
I
in that
think it
world?
prepared me because there was that level of responsibility and commitment to Bob And I told Bob nothing would go in front of the camera that he wasn't comfortable with. And I
Yeah.
made that movie hand in hand with him, step in step. And it was a great learning ground for City of Lies for sure.
Yeah, so that brings us full circle to City of Lies, which is your current movie. We got through all five big movies on your filmography. Before we go, I always like to ask my guests, what advice do you have for someone who dreams of having a career like yours?
Um, all I could say is that the opportunity that I have to talk with you today, Brett, outside of our friendship, and I appreciate the care and concern. And by the way, you're quite good at this.
Yeah.
I've been interviewed a lot, actually. People are not. You're very natural.
Well, we're friends. I always interview my friends, and I think
There you go.
it gives people a different perspective because you have personal anecdotes. I knew you
Look,
before all this, so yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's a
No,
cool
I did share some things some anecdotes I haven't shared before.
Yeah,
But I really willed myself to create all these opportunities. So if you ask me like how I'm here today speaking with you, it was through just sheer will and hard work and determination, and not letting what people told me my life could be, but actually blocking out the noise and fighting through it. And I think that to me is the starting point for any person aspiring for any dream, is to fight and to block out the noise and to will it to happen for yourself. Because at the end
yeah,
of the day, when you look in the mirror, if you are a success or you're a failure by your own estimation, you only have yourself to blame. And even through the hardships, like, I talked openly a bit about some of the hardships of Runner Runner. It would
yeah,
be very easy to point fingers on Runner Runner, Infiltrator, and the challenge we had. Well, this one's the fault or this one's to blame. And I actually don't look at the world that way. I look in the mirror and I know that I made those choices that got me there, and I have to accept responsibility, sink or swim with the outcome of those choices. And
yeah.
we're defined by our choices. So I think when you start with wanting to will it to happen, and you make the right choices, and if you make the wrong ones, you learn from it, and you keep forging ahead, and you never stop.
Yeah, I like that. I do want to add too that you've always been a great mentor to me too. You've always made yourself available to talk. You're always give advice, meet for lunch, whatever it is. But yeah, I think you've always taken the time to share your stories with other people, give people the advice or inspiration or whatever they need to kind of stick with this business because it's a tough place to be. But
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I
yeah,
have a lot of love and respect for you. You're an incredibly affable, like humble, kind, sensitive human being. And, you have these amazing relationships that you've built through the years with people, because I think they really love and trust you. And you've curated like a movie night, and you've curated your podcast, and you've curated your own movies, and all of these things and relationships. And, genuinely, I'm not just saying this because I'm here. My reason and willingness to do this, because I think there's a level of vulnerability. Speaking about these things in today's world, it's
mhm,
not like we speak about them and then it's done, or it lives in a newspaper, or it lives on, and
yeah,
of it, and there's so much of it. So there's a level of trust that goes into all of this. But I think the DNA of I've realized a few things. I've always wanted to help people because I feel like very few, if any, ever helped me.
mhm,
So I thereby always wanted to help people. What I also learned is the best way I can help people is actually now to really go out and achieve my goals and achieve the success that I really know in my heart that I'm able to. And then in doing so, I really be able to help people in a much larger way. So when I talk about like making that thing with the tape, or
yeah,
how to reach individuals and how to reach the masses and all of these things, I know it starts with actually building my own success in a way, so that it's not just about the eye of it, but so that I can sort of give to the rest of the world. And there's an amazing woman that spoke to me about the gifts that particular artists had. And she had said to me, you have to take care of yourself because those gifts aren't your own, they're the rest of the world's. And
mm,
that was really impactful to me, because um, it made me recognize that that's my hope for the larger future of the movies that I want to make. And that's why City of Lies really, as I've said over and over here, demarcates that it's a movie that whether you like it or don't like it, that's fine. But I think there's a messaging that comes with it that's deeply important to the responsibility we all have as human beings, and how we treat each other, and what it means for truth and justice and these kind of things. So I've got some other movies, hopefully, that I'll be lucky enough and fortunate enough to will to happen,
yeah.
that will be really meaningful for the world and hopefully inspire.
Do you know what's next or not yet?
I have a few ideas, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I've got some ideas of things I want to work on with you, so maybe
All right, cool.
we'll
Yeah, you
talk
sent me
about
that
that
one
too.
thing we have to talk about, so we'll
Yeah,
do it.
For sure. I do remember actually before we go, I do remember we went to lunch at the Nosh in Beverly Hills. That was, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah,
the first time I was ever there. You brought me there. And I remember you said to me, "What movie do you want to make?" And I told you, and you're like, "How much do you need to make it?" And I told you, like, "Why do you need that much to make it?" And I never forgot that because I was like, he's right. He's like, if you're going to make it, you're going to make it for whatever you're given to make
yeah.
it.
You're gonna back
It's,
into that
you,
number.
you back into the budget, yeah. So the very last thing we do here at On the List is called the mystery question. I've been doing this since episode 1. This is
Yeah.
episode 63.
Oh wow.
So yeah, it's when the guest from my last podcast leaves a question for my next guest.
Okay.
And so we used to do it in person pre-quarantine, but now I have the person email it, I print it, I seal it in an envelope, and then I open it so it's the last question of the
All
email
right. Sounds good.
I ask my
So
guest
I'll be emailing you a question after this.
for my next guest. So the last guest on my last episode was Emmanuel Shrieky.
Oh wow.
She's Sloane on Entourage. She's
And
now Lana Lang on Superman and Lois. So this question is from
I'm a
Emmanuel.
big fan, so you could tell her thank you for leaving the question for
I
me.
will. I'll send her this clip. So Emmanuel Shrieky's question is, what do you know today that you wish your younger self knew? That's what that says.
First off, it's an excellent question.
Yeah.
The Players Tribune does a younger self.
Yes. Well,
Let-
Vernon Turner, remember?
Oh yeah, you're the one that introduced me to that. Wow,
Yeah.
that's mind blowing.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a perfect question for you, actually.
it's a good one. It's a deep one. I have to give the astute abridged answer.
Okay.
I think that I would still be standing all these years later. And what I mean by that is, because I operate from a very emotional place, I tend, not now, but when I was younger, to lose perspective,
Hmm.
and emotionally get so caught up in what I thought was the significance of the moment. But in having been introduced to like yoga and breathing and all these things that have come with my growth and maturity, I just think that in the midst of the storm, there is this world where maybe I could have just breathed through things and relaxed through them, knowing that I would still be standing years later. I think there was this inherent fear that I had of what maybe the future looked like, or in the moment I was trying to control things. So therefore, as a result of that, you're trying to control things. And
Hmm.
by trying to control things, you in some way become your own worst enemy.
Mm.
And so therefore, as a result of that, I think if I knew with certainty that I'd still be standing years later, I might have been able to breathe and relax through those things. But moreover, what it leads me to, because I said it's a complex answer,
Yeah.
the simple answer took me a moment to explain that to get there is, every time I follow my heart, I land on my feet. Every time I don't, I land upside down. And I think that if I knew that, I would have always remained with following my heart. And in the journey of this storytelling that we shared today, there were some anecdotes where I was like, I made a mistake, or that didn't really go well. And I think that I always knew prior to the mistake or it not going well, right from wrong, or what my heart wanted. And I didn't follow it. I let people influence me. I let different things transpire. And ultimately, I think if I had just followed my heart in those instances, I would have landed on my feet. So if I had known as a younger self, I'd still be standing. I would have relaxed more. I would have been less hard on myself. I would have breathed through it, and I would have followed my heart. And I think those would have been invaluable lessons for me into my later years, for sure.
Wow. Great answer. I love that. Well, you have landed on your feet, so
Thank you. I'm trying.
you're
It's just,
obviously following your heart. That's a
I'm
great.
really excited for the next few years of life. So
Yeah.
I'm very honored and appreciative that I'm still standing. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. And that was a great question from Emmanuel Shrieky.
It was.
She said on the episode, if you watch it or listen to the last episode, number 62,
Well,
she said, she feels she's 45 and she's been acting since she's like 18, 19. She feels she's still scratching the surface and she still hasn't found that role that people are going to say, wow, I didn't know she could do that, that she
wow.
could really sink her teeth into.
I'm a
So
big fan.
maybe, oh, I was going to say, since you're a fan, maybe it's a Brad Furman movie that's going to be
There
the
you go.
movie. So
That's cool.
maybe that's why she asked you the question.
There
Uh,
you go. I'll think hard on my next question for 64. But
yeah, for sure. You've
Emmanuel,
been,
thank you so much. I appreciate
yeah,
the question.
of course. And so that is a wrap on episode number 63. Thank you so much, Brad Furman, for doing this. Everybody, check out his new movie, City of Lies. It's available now in theaters and on VOD. And if you haven't seen them, check out his previous movies like The Take and Lincoln Lawyer. And if you have seen them, watch them again. Why
Right.
not?
You're truly a gem. Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you so much for doing this. So thank you again to Brad. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And I will talk to you next time. Bye.
Take care.
So that's it. I wanted to take a minute to talk about the sponsors of On the List: Hint Water, eBay, and Magic Spoon cereal. So first we've got Hint Water. I've got some of my favorite flavors right here. Here's the watermelon, the strawberry kiwi, raspberry, pineapple, and I also love the crisp apple, blood orange, lemon, pear, clementine. I love all the flavors. So what's really cool about Hint is that there's no sugar, no diet sweeteners, no calories, no preservatives, and it's non-GMO certified. It's also vegan, contains no nuts, no soy, no gluten, no MSG. And so Hint is offering home delivery when you sign up on the Hint website, drinkhint.com. And they're offering new customers 36 bottles for $36 if you use the code NEW36 at checkout, NEW36. So go to drinkhint.com and use the code NEW36 at checkout. And next we've got eBay. So if you like vintage sneakers as much as I do, eBay is the place for you. Here's a pair right here. Here's another pair right here. So what's cool about eBay is that they've got rare dead stock, but they've also got the latest releases, and you can find the exact pair that you're looking for on eBay. So it was actually the original sneaker marketplace, and it's still the place to go to get the pair you've been looking for. So eBay has an authenticity guarantee, and they also have a team of independent professional authenticators performing rigorous inspections of the sneakers that you purchase before they're sent to you. So you can shop confidently knowing that your pair is the real deal. And for sneaker sellers out there, eBay eliminated selling fees on sneakers over $100. So it's free to sell or flip your collection. Other sites take 25%, but eBay waived the fee. So check out ebay.com/sneakers today. And last but not least, Magic Spoon cereal. So Magic Spoon cereal is one of my favorite cereals. There it is right there. This is the peanut butter flavor. So, if you've tried to cut back on sugar or carbs or unhealthy foods in general, then Magic Spoon's the answer for you. So they've got frosted, blueberry, cocoa. I mix the cocoa with the peanut butter, so you have peanut butter and chocolate. I also mix the frosted with the blueberry. And they've also got a fruity flavor. And everyone I've told Magic Spoon about has gotten hooked on it. So the best thing about Magic Spoon cereal, besides the fact that it tastes so good, is zero sugar, no sugar at all, even though it tastes great. It's also low carb, only 3 grams, so it's keto friendly. And it's high in protein, 11 grams per serving. So it's got everything you need, and it excludes all the stuff you don't, and it's just really good. So if you go to magicspoon.com/Brett, BRETT, you can make your own variety pack of 4 flavors. You can choose from frosted, blueberry, fruity, cocoa, peanut butter, and whatever new flavors they have to offer. Then just use the code BRETT, BRETT, at checkout for free shipping. So go to magicspoon.com/Brett and then use the code BRETT, BRETT, at checkout for free shipping. And I will see you guys next time.